Chapter 1. Happy Birthday, Arya. As evening fell at Skywater Estate, a group of teenagers and young adults gathered around a girl in a blue princess dress and a tiara, presenting her with a 3-tiered birthday cake. Julian Hawthorne, who was usually a slacker, was uncharacteristically serious as he handed over a gift box. Happy 18th birthday, little Arya. Arya's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled and thanked him. Afterward, everyone began cutting the cake, singing the birthday song, and playing games. Everything was perfectly harmonious. But amidst the lively and cheerful atmosphere, only the birthday girl, Arya herself, seemed distracted. She repeatedly glanced up at the grandfather clock on the wall, then toward the tightly closed front door. He still hadn't come back. The guests gradually dispersed around 8 or 9 in the evening, leaving only Julian behind. Skywater Estate belonged to Julian's uncle, Ethan Hawthorne. 10 years ago, after Arya's parents died in a car crash, she was brought back from an orphanage by the Hawthorne family, who were old family friends. Ever since she had moved in with Ethan, Julian had been a frequent visitor. "Why isn't Uncle Ethan back? No matter how busy he is, he never misses your birthday." Julian had downed a few beers and stood up, a little unsteady on his feet. Arya smiled and explained, "I'm not a little kid anymore. I don't need Uncle Ethan with me every year." Julian nodded, seeming to agree. He walked toward the door. "My driver's here to pick me up. I'll get going." Arya stood to see him off. "Okay." After Julian left, the once bustling villa fell silent. Arya tidied up the slightly messy living room, then glanced at the time. A deep sense of loneliness, long hidden, slowly seeped out from her eyes. She turned off the lights, took off her shoes, and curled up in a corner of the sofa, hugging her knees as she waited quietly. The night deepened. With only half an hour left until midnight, a drowsy Arya finally heard the sound of the front door opening. Click, the living room lights flashed on, and the sudden brightness was jarring. Arya squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them again, Ethan Hawthorne's tall figure stood before her, carrying the chill of the late-night air. Ethan looked at her, his voice as deep as a cello. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" "Uncle Ethan, today is my 18th birthday," she said, her voice unconsciously laced with grievance. Ethan froze, rubbing his brow with a tired hand. "I'm sorry, I had too much to deal with today, I forgot." Arya knew it must be something like that. As the president of Mingrui Group, he was incredibly busy. She should be understanding. But in the past, no matter how busy he was, he had always celebrated her birthday with her. He would prepare thoughtful gifts, fulfill her long-awaited wishes, and most importantly, set aside an entire day just to be with her. But ever since she had grown up, it seemed he had never been that good to her again. In its place came a gradual distance and coldness. The thought made her eyes sting, but she still obediently shook her head. "It's okay, Uncle Ethan. I know you're busy." She tiptoed off the sofa, took a slice of cake from the fridge, and presented it to him like a treasure. "This is the birthday cake I saved for you." The girl's eyes were incredibly pure. Ethan had never liked sweets, but he accepted the cake nonetheless. Under Arya's watchful gaze, he forced himself to take a bite. Then he glanced at the clock. There was still a little time. "Arya, what do you want?" Arya's heart skipped a beat. The words she had been holding back all day were about to burst out. Her 18th birthday was a day she had been looking forward to for years. This day meant she was an adult, that she could have the thoughts and feelings of a grown-up. It also meant she could confess to the person she loved. "I only want one gift." Arya looked at him quietly, her fawn-like eyes clear and bright. Ethan had no idea what she wanted. He looked at her coolly, signaling for her to continue. The clock hand ticked past midnight. Her 18th birthday was officially over, telling her she was truly grown up. "You!" Chapter 2. The vast living room fell silent. The warm yellow light cascaded onto Arya's blue princess dress, making her look as beautiful as a dream. She watched him quietly, her eyes full of expectation. But in an instant, Ethan's expression turned cold. "What nonsense are you talking about?" A single sentence shattered the brief, enchanting atmosphere. The sparkle in Arya's eyes stiffened. Ethan continued, "Have I been spoiling you too much all these years, letting you get so out of hand?" Such a direct and blunt rejection, coupled with his reprimand, made Arya's face turn pale. A wave of shame washed over her. Seeing Ethan's furrowed brow, she suddenly regretted her impulsiveness. From now on, he would probably only distance himself from her even more. No, this wasn't the outcome she wanted. Arya suppressed the disappointment in her heart and forced a bright smile. Uncle Ethan, you totally fell for it. I lost a game of truth or dare with Julian and the others today. That was just my dare, she said, turning to sit back on the sofa. She complained, Uncle Ethan, when you're not home, I always lose to Julian. Hearing this explanation, Ethan stared at her intently. Truth or dare? The corners of Arya's eyes crinkled. Yeah, Uncle Ethan, that was just a joke. If you don't like it, I won't play that game with them anymore. Ethan watched her in silence for a moment, seeming to accept her explanation. Don't make jokes like that again. Get some rest. With that, he turned and walked toward the bathroom. He didn't see that the moment he turned away, the smile vanished from Arya's face, leaving only endless bitterness. The next day, when she got up, she opened her door and ran right into Ethan, who had just come out of his study. After what happened last night, Arya felt a little awkward and her gaze was evasive. Ethan, however, was as composed as ever, as if he hadn't given yesterday's joke a second thought. Come downstairs for breakfast. Arya nodded. Okay. The breakfast table was silent. In fact, a few years ago, their meals hadn't been like this. Arya had always been a picky eater, and Ethan would have to patiently coax her to eat. Sometimes he would pretend to be stern, scaring her, only to quickly soften. But now that she was grown up, it seemed she had lost the right to be coddled by him. Arya ate distractedly. Feeling bored, she opened her phone, but her attention was immediately captured by a news story that had suddenly shot to the top of the trending topics on social media. Famous pianist Sylvia Vance returns home. Mingrui Group's president personally greets her at the airport. Sparking romance rumors, the accompanying photo was of Ethan picking up Sylvia Vance at the airport just last night. Arya froze. So, he hadn't come back for her birthday yesterday, not because of work, but because he went to pick up Sylvia. She stared at the paparazzi photo on her phone, at how close the two of them looked. She stared until her eyes felt dry before biting her lip and turning off the screen. Arya couldn't help but look up at him and ask, Uncle Ethan, did you go to the airport yesterday? Ethan was stunned for a moment. Seeing the phone in her hand, he knew she had probably seen the news. He picked up the black coffee beside him and took a sip. Yes. Arya tried her best to appear nonchalant, but she couldn't stop herself from wanting to know more. Who is this Sylvia Vance? I don't think I've ever heard you mention her before. Ethan set down his coffee cup. Just hearing the name seemed to soften his gaze. She's someone very important to me. Important? Arya's heart trembled. She suddenly remembered her first year at Skywater Estate. Having just lost her parents, she was timid and withdrawn, even hiding in a closet all day. Ethan would always put aside his work at the company to be with her. One time, she heard Julian's parents from inside the closet, urging Ethan to go back to the office. But he had said, work isn't as important as Arya. From that moment on, Arya had truly let down her guard and accepted this new home. But now, he had someone else in his heart, someone more important than her. Chapter 3. That evening, Arya received another text from Ethan, not coming home tonight. She stared at it in silence for a moment before replying with a single, okay, then turned off her phone. It had been almost a week since her birthday, and Ethan hadn't come back once. Arya's mood grew increasingly gloomy. Julian had asked her out several times, but she had refused every invitation. The next morning, Julian showed up at Skywater Estate again. Arya, you've been in such a slump lately. I have to take you out and get your mind off things. This time, he simply grabbed her hand and pulled her outside. Julian was tall with long legs, and she couldn't resist at all as she was dragged into the car. Arya sat listlessly in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, looking completely uninterested in everything. Until Julian parked the car outside a performance hall. What did you bring me here for? Julian gave a mysterious smile and pulled her out of the car. Arya, have you ever heard the saying that when you're feeling down, music is the best medicine? The two of them walked into the theater. Just as they entered the concert hall, they unexpectedly ran into Ethan. Julian had always been afraid of his uncle, and his cheerful expression instantly vanished. Uncle Ethan, what are you doing here? Ethan glanced at Arya first. She looked back at him, her eyes full of surprise. He shifted his gaze away and said calmly, I'm here to see a friend. Just as he finished speaking, Sylvia Vance peeked out from backstage. Seeing Ethan, she called out, "Ethan, over here." Ethan immediately said, "I'm heading over. Jules, take good care of Arya." Julian nodded. I know. Arya's eyes followed Ethan's back as he walked over to stand with Sylvia. She watched them talk so closely and naturally, saw the rare gentle expression on his face as he spoke, a mix of complicated feelings churned inside her. It wasn't until 10 minutes before the performance began that Ethan emerged from backstage and took a seat in the front row. Arya stared at his straight back from behind, momentarily lost in thought. This Sylvia has quite the connection with my uncle. Who is she, really? Don't tell me she's my future aunt, Julian muttered to himself, having clearly noticed the different way Ethan treated Sylvia. Arya shook her head. She didn't know either, but her heart sank further and further. Yes, who was she? Who could make the proud and powerful head of the Hawthorne family personally pick her up from the airport? Who could make the ever-busy president of Mingrui Group take time out of his day to attend a concert? Who could make Ethan Hawthorne say she was someone very important? She lowered her head, no longer in the mood for the concert. It wasn't until Sylvia, the final performer, finished her last piece that the entire concert hall erupted in thunderous applause. Arya finally snapped back to reality and clapped along with the others. She looked up and saw Ethan, who had been sitting in the front row, suddenly stand up. Holding a bouquet of flowers, he walked up the steps with his long legs and presented the flowers to Sylvia in front of the entire audience. They stood on stage together, the man tall and composed, the woman elegant and gentle. They looked perfect for each other. Reporters in the front rows jumped to their feet, scrambling to take photos, all vying for the headline. The president of Mingrui Group presenting flowers to a famous pianist in public was practically concrete proof of the rumors from a few days ago. Arya's chest felt tight, and she was about to get up and leave. The next second, a wave of cheers erupted throughout the hall. She instinctively looked up and froze on the spot. She saw Sylvia, after accepting the flowers, wrap her arms around Ethan's neck, stand on her tiptoes, and kiss his right cheek. Chapter 4, Arya's mind went blank. She stood there, completely rigid, her eyes stinging fiercely. Unable to watch the stage any longer, she stood up and bolted out of the hall. Arya, seeing her suddenly rush out, Julian called her name without thinking. It was hard to say if Ethan, on stage, heard him, but he suddenly turned his head to look at the audience. Arya was already gone. Arya didn't wait for Julian and hailed a taxi directly. She called him to say she wasn't feeling well and was going home to rest, so he didn't follow her. Once back, she locked herself in her room, the scene from the concert flashing repeatedly in her mind. Her eyes were already incredibly red, and tears streamed down her face like broken strands of pearls. It wasn't that she hadn't imagined what her reaction would be if Ethan didn't like her, and she saw him with someone else one day. Arya had always thought she would be good at hiding it, just like how she had hidden her love for him so well all these years. But it wasn't until today, when she saw another woman kiss him with her own eyes, and the usually cold Ethan didn't refuse, that she truly felt the sharp pain in her heart. She realized it was impossible to hide even a fraction of it. Arya threw herself onto the bed, crying silently. The next day, when Ethan came home, she was sitting alone on the sofa. When she saw him, her gaze flickered for a moment before returning to a lifeless gloom. "Uncle Ethan, you're back." Ethan grunted in acknowledgement. Noticing that her mood was off, he walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" Arya shook her head. Ethan stood in front of her for a moment, then, as if another thought occurred to him, he said softly, "Arya, I forgot your birthday last time. How about I make it up to you with a gift?" The familiar, gentle tone made Arya pause. It was just like how he used to coax her when she was upset that he had come home too late. For a second, Arya wanted to tell him everything on her mind. But the thought of Ethan's reaction on her birthday night made her instinctively shrink back. She looked up at Ethan's face and ultimately suppressed all her words, nodding quietly. Ethan patted her hair, then turned and went upstairs. The compensatory birthday gift arrived the next day, delivered by Ethan's assistant. Arya opened it and saw a very beautiful, high-end couture dress. It was her favorite color, pink. Seeing that familiar shade, Arya's heart couldn't help but stir. Uncle Ethan really does care about me. He's making up for my birthday, and even remembers I like pink. So Arya, don't misunderstand him. He still cares about you, just like he always has. She repeated these words to herself over and over. Having talked herself around, Arya composed herself and tried to forget what had happened at the concert hall. A few days later, it was time for the Hawthorne family's monthly dinner. She wore the dress to the Hawthorne family manor. The Hawthorne manor was home to Ethan's father and Julian's family. Ever since Arya was adopted by the Hawthornes at the age of 10, Ethan had always brought her to the family dinners. "Arya's here, that dress is so pretty. Arya, you're getting more and more beautiful," Julian's mother, Penelope, said with a smile. Arya blushed. "You're too kind, Mrs. Hawthorne. By the way, why didn't Ethan come with you?" Arya explained. "He's probably busy at the office. Uncle Ethan told me to come ahead." Penelope looked puzzled. "Busy with what?" "I called his assistant this morning, and he said Ethan didn't go to the company at all." Arya froze. Just then, familiar footsteps sounded from behind. She turned around and saw Sylvia Vance walking in arm with Ethan. And when she saw the dress Sylvia was wearing, her face instantly turned pale. Chapter 5, they were wearing the same style of dress, except Sylvia's was a harder to get red. Compared to Arya's delicate pink, it was more passionate and eye-catching. But more shocking than the matching dresses was the fact that her uncle had brought Sylvia Vance to the family dinner. Even Penelope was clearly stunned. "Ethan, who is this?" "Sylvia Vance. A friend of mine." His explanation was brief and to the point, as good as no explanation at all. It was Sylvia who spoke up with a faint smile. "I just moved back to the country and don't have many friends here. Ethan saw that I was bored and brought me along. I hope I'm not intruding." Penelope naturally wouldn't say anything. But the fact that her younger brother, who had never shown interest in women, had brought a female companion home for the first time left the Hawthorne family in shock for a good while. Even Julian leaned close to Arya's ear and whispered, "This woman is definitely something else." Arya's heart felt empty. She nodded mechanically. Soon, Ethan was called into the study by his grandfather, Harrison Hawthorne SR. Penelope sat down with Sylvia in the living room. Arya was there too. When Sylvia saw her, a dark glint flashed in her eyes but quickly vanished. Within a few minutes, Penelope had thoroughly questioned Sylvia about her relationship with her brother. Arya learned that they were university classmates, but Sylvia had gone abroad very early on, which was why Ethan had rarely mentioned her. When Arya heard Sylvia say that Ethan had personally picked her up from the airport on the day she returned, she finally couldn't listen anymore. She stood up and went to the restroom. She stood at the sink, splashing her face hard with water, telling herself not to overthink things. A moment later, Sylvia walked in. She looked at Arya. "You're Arya, right? The kid Ethan raised?" Arya nodded coolly, wanting to leave. Just as she was about to walk away, Sylvia glanced at her dress and said, seemingly offhandedly, "Ethan gave you this dress, didn't he? Good, at least it didn't go to waste." Arya stopped in her tracks and looked at Sylvia. Sylvia feigned surprise. "You didn't know? Both of these dresses were originally gifts from Ethan to me, but I prefer the red one, so to not let the pink one go to waste, I gave it back to him. I didn't expect him to give it to you." Arya's hands clenched into fists. "That's impossible." "Impossible?" Sylvia said, as if she had heard a joke. "Arya, you're just an orphan the Hawthornes took in. You should be grateful that Ethan gave you this dress." The condescension in her voice was palpable, and it made Arya's face drain of color. "An orphan?" Yes, she was just an adopted orphan. A few simple words pierced through all her armor. Arya turned and fled in humiliation. It wasn't until just before the family dinner began that Ethan came out of the study. He walked straight toward Sylvia, and the two of them spoke as if no one else was around. He even gave Sylvia a rare smile. It was a smile that he used to only show to Arya. Only today did she realize that his special favor was never hers alone. Even the compensatory birthday gift he gave her was just someone else's leftover. The dinner began. Arya walked slowly to the dining table, her head down, eating quietly but tasting nothing. At the table, Harrison Hawthorne SR glanced at Sylvia with a satisfied look, then frowned at Julian, who was sitting next to Arya. Julian was also 20 years old this year, with a rather wild and rebellious nature. Between the uncle and the nephew, they were the two who gave the old man the most headaches. Now that Ethan had a suitable person by his side, Harrison SR aimed all his fire at Julian. Julian was completely oblivious, placing a shrimp in Arya's bowl. "This is good, try it." Seeing their intimate interaction, Harrison S.R.'s eyes darkened. Chapter 6, "You brat, Arya is an adult now, watch your behavior." Julian was unfazed. "I'm just giving her a piece of food." Harrison S.R. said angrily, "Who did you learn this slacker attitude from? You're 20 and still have no sense of propriety. You're thoughtless and have no boundaries. Who would dare marry you?" Arya sensitively put down her chopsticks, sensing that her grandfather's words weren't just directed at Julian. However, Julian was an expert at provoking his grandfather. He threw an arm around Arya's shoulder. "I'll just marry Arya then. She'd definitely dare to marry me." The moment he said that, the atmosphere at the dinner table froze. Not only did his grandfather's brow furrow in anger, but even Julian's parents' expressions changed. As if that wasn't enough, Julian patted Arya's back. "Arya, what do you say? Will you marry me or not?" Arya was startled by his words and didn't know how to answer. She instinctively looked at Ethan. But when her gaze swept past Sylvia next to him, she couldn't help but think pessimistically that her uncle probably didn't want to be involved with her affairs anymore. Fortunately, Ethan spoke up. "Jules, don't make that kind of joke. Arya is still so young." Ethan had always commanded a great deal of authority, and even a troublemaker like Julian didn't dare to provoke him. Julian shrugged, let go of Arya, and said no more. And when Arya heard Ethan speak up for her, a part of her heart suddenly seemed to leap. She lowered her head, a faint light flickering in her eyes. Liking someone made you this vulnerable. Even if you were sad one second, the next, if that person did one small thing for you, you couldn't help but be filled with hope again. That seed of secret love needed only a tiny drop of water to break through the soil and grow wildly, like a vine. After that, no one in the family mentioned the topic again. The dinner ended in a strange silence. That evening, back at Skywater Estate, Arya changed out of the pink dress and stared at it for a long time. After much hesitation, she couldn't resist going to the door of Ethan's study. She wanted to ask him clearly who the dress was originally for. With that thought, Arya had just mustered the courage to knock on the study door when she heard a familiar voice from inside. "Uncle Ethan, why did you stop me just now?" Inside the study, Julian stood before Ethan, his face full of dissatisfaction. Ethan was wearing a gray loungewear set and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, looking less sharp than during the day, but his gaze was still intimidating. He looked at Julian calmly. "Because you and Arya are not suitable for each other." Arya's hand, poised to knock, slowly froze. She stood silently at the door, her head bowed. Julian grew angrier. "What do you mean, not suitable? I like Arya, and I want to be with her." He hadn't argued back at the manor because he didn't want to put Arya in a difficult position, but Julian had sensed that not his grandfather, his parents, nor even his uncle seemed to want him and Arya together. He couldn't help but demand a clear answer. Hearing his words, Ethan's expression turned serious, his thin lips pressed into a tight line. "Do you know what you're saying? Julian, you're 20, not 2. As the future heir of the Hawthorne family, do you think you can make your own decisions about your marriage?" Julian was still naive and a bit confused. "So what's wrong with me and Arya being together? My parents seem to like her too." His innocence made Ethan shake his head. Liking someone is the most useless emotion. Whether you like her or she likes you, you two can't be together. Chapter 7, although Arya grew up with you, she is ultimately just a child adopted by the Hawthorne family. And you are the future heir of the Hawthorne family. Do you think your statuses are compatible? Julian was stunned. He had grown up with Arya and had long seen her as family, never once considering the issue of their status. He stuck out his neck defiantly. "What if I insist on being with her?" Ethan's gaze was sharp. "Then do you think you have the power to defy the family? Do you have the ability to take care of her on your own? Would Arya be willing to break with us and suffer a lifetime of condemnation for your sake?" 3 consecutive questions battered Julian into retreat. His face was a mask of defeat. He couldn't even utter a single rebuttal. Ethan said coolly, "Since you can't, then put away those thoughts. Arya is an adult now. I won't interfere with who she wants to be with. But you, absolutely not." No more sound came from Julian in the study. And Arya, standing outside the door, stared blankly at the floor, her eyes frighteningly red. She clutched the pink dress tightly in one hand. Without knocking, she silently turned and walked away. Back in her room, tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. She fumbled to lock the door, then slid down against it, sobbing. She tried to stop the tears, but they wouldn't cease. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. I won't interfere with who she wants to be with, but you, absolutely not. Arya let out a desolate laugh. So, that was why he had spoken up for her today. It was just because he felt she wasn't good enough for the Hawthorne family. Not good enough for Julian, and therefore, even less good enough for him. Yes, she was just an orphan, a fallen socialite. She knew, she had always known. The Hawthorne elders didn't want her to get too close to Julian. In fact, the reason she had moved out to live with Ethan after being adopted was because Harrison Sr. was worried she and Julian would develop other feelings growing up under the same roof. But she had never imagined that even her uncle thought the same way. In all her years of being raised by the Hawthornes, she had never dared to dream of anything else. But matters of the heart never followed reason. She hadn't fallen for Julian, but for someone even more forbidden. A suffocating pain seized her, wave after wave, leaving her breathless. Since her parents' death, Arya had rarely cried. She knew her position was awkward and seldom threw tantrums in front of the Hawthornes. Only when she was very close to Ethan in the past would she let her pampered side show, unable to resist being coquettish with him. She sobbed, sitting by the door all night until dawn broke. Her head felt heavy and muddled. She swayed as she tried to stand, but the moment she was on her feet, she crumpled to the floor and passed out. When she woke up, only the villa's housekeeper was by her bed. Miss, you're finally awake. Arya's throat was raw, but she instinctively asked, Where's Uncle Ethan? The housekeeper replied, Mr. Hawthorne went out last night. He doesn't know you fainted. Should I call him? Don't bother him, she said woodenly. You can all leave. The housekeeper complied and left. Arya sat mechanically against the headboard, staring blankly for what felt like an eternity. Then, an unfamiliar number rang on her phone. When she answered, a middle-aged woman's voice came through. Arya, I'm back. Chapter 8. Half an hour later, in a coffee shop near Skywater Estate. Lillian Garland looked at the small, well-behaved young woman across from her, her eyes filled with heartache and guilt. Arya, would you be willing to come back to the United States with me? Arya stared at her in shock. The last time she had seen her Aunt Lillian was at her parents' funeral when she was 8. Lillian had immigrated to the U.S. over 20 years ago. When her brother and sister-in-law passed away, she had considered taking young Arya to America. However, Arya was too devastated by the loss of her parents, and Lillian worried a new country would be even harder for her. Furthermore, Lillian's own career in the U.S. was not going well at the time, and she didn't have the energy to care for a child. In the end, she entrusted Arya to the care of their old family friend, Harrison Hawthorne Sr. Now, Lillian was finally free and wanted to make it up to her poor niece. Arya's mind was a tangled mess. She stared blankly at the coffee in front of her. Finally, she said, Aunt Lillian, my parents' death anniversary is in 3 days. Let's talk about it after that. Lillian nodded. Okay, I'll wait for you. After saying goodbye to Lillian, she returned to Skywater Estate. As she entered the living room, she found that Ethan had already returned. Seeing her come in from outside, he asked, Where were you? Arya stared at his face, and for the first time, felt he was so far away from her. She used to think the biggest obstacle between them was age. Now she knew that, for her, he had always been unattainable. Since they could never be together, all the things that had once worried, frightened, and made her shrink back were no longer problems. There were some things she no longer wanted to hide. At least before she lost him completely, she had to fight for it one last time. Having made her decision, she didn't answer Ethan's question. Instead, she said softly, Uncle Ethan, can you come with me to see Mom and Dad in 3 days? Ethan paused slightly, remembering that it would be the anniversary of her parents' death. He lowered his eyes. I have something else scheduled that day. I probably won't be home. Arya looked at him with pale eyes and pleaded again, Uncle Ethan, please come back, okay? I have something very important to tell you that day. It had been a long time since she had begged him like this. Ethan was momentarily lost in thought. Finally, under her expectant gaze, he gave an almost involuntary nod. Uncle Ethan, I'll wait for you at the cemetery. 3 days later, on the anniversary, Arya wore a black dress and went to the cemetery early in the morning. In previous years, Ethan would always be by her side on this day, because this day was an eternal nightmare for Arya. 10 years ago, an 8-year-old Arya had witnessed her parents' fatal car crash. For a long time, she couldn't escape that shadow. On the first anniversary of their death, she had suddenly run out into a heavy downpour at night. It was Ethan who had dropped all his work to find her, finally locating her at the cemetery. Later, he promised her that he would be by her side every year on this day. But now, she stood alone before her parents' tombstone. The cemetery was cold and desolate, the wind rustling through withered leaves. Arya kept looking into the distance, waiting for the man who said he would come. When she didn't see him, she would lower her head and murmur to the tombstone, "Mom, Dad, he'll come. He won't abandon me. He'll definitely come." But she waited from day to night, and Ethan never appeared. The sky opened up, rain pouring down with flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder. The pain, fear, despair, and loneliness from 10 years ago all came rushing back. But the difference was, Ethan had been by her side back then. Now, there was no one left to be with her. Arya waited for an entire night. As the sky began to lighten, she finally accepted the fact that he wasn't coming. With soaked hair and clothes, she left the cemetery like a walking corpse. She walked numbly down the road and, clinging to a final shred of hope, dialed Ethan's number. When the call connected, it was Sylvia's voice that answered. "Arya, is something wrong? Ethan is helping me pick out a diamond ring and can't take your call." Arya stopped in her tracks, feeling as if she had been plunged into an icy abyss. "A diamond ring?" Chapter 9. Sylvia let out a light laugh. "That's right. He planned a huge surprise and proposed to me yesterday. We're going to meet the parents today." Thud, the phone slipped from her hand and crashed to the ground. A roaring filled her ears, and she couldn't hear anything else. On the other end, Sylvia had just deleted the call log when Ethan walked into the office. Seeing Sylvia with his phone, he asked, "Did someone call for me?" Sylvia handed him the phone. "No, I was just checking the time." Ethan took it, looking at her with suspicion. Sylvia, feeling guilty under his gaze, reached out to take his arm. "Your grandfather was just rushing us. We should hurry back to the manor, or I'm afraid he'll get suspicious." Ethan sidestepped her touch, his tone distant. "Thank you for your help this time." After returning from the cemetery, Arya took a hot shower. Looking at her pathetic, red-eyed reflection in the mirror, she slowly wiped away her tears and made a call to Lillian. That same day, she packed her things at the villa. She left a lot behind, especially the various gifts Ethan had given her over the years, which filled an entire large cabinet. Looking at those gifts, her nose still stung, but in the end, Arya didn't look back. She quietly left the villa with her suitcase. Before takeoff, standing at the boarding gate in the airport, she dialed Ethan's number one last time. "Arya?" Ethan's voice came from the other end, tinged with exhaustion. Listening to his voice, Arya spoke slowly. "Uncle Ethan, I have something I want to say to you." Ethan sensed something was wrong with her tone, and a faint unease crept into his heart. He explained in a low voice, "I had something to do yesterday, so I didn't make it to the cemetery." Arya gently interrupted him. "That's not what I want to talk about. Uncle Ethan, do you remember what I said to you on the night of my birthday?" Ethan froze and frowned. "Don't bring up those jokes again." Arya shook her head. "No, it wasn't a joke." She said, word by word, "Uncle Ethan, I really do love you. I was adopted by you when I was 5, and from that moment on, you were the only person left in my world. When I was little, to earn a word of praise from you, I forced myself to be obedient and sensible, to study hard, and to never cause you any trouble. When I grew up, I wanted you to love me too. I wanted us to be together." "Arya," Ethan cut her off abruptly. "Stop talking nonsense." Ethan's eyes were dark. Although his tone was angry, if one listened closely, a hint of panic could be detected. "Uncle Ethan, I'm perfectly clear-headed. You are the president of Mingrui Group, and I am just an orphan. You raised me, and you are my uncle in name. I know that loving you is overreaching, shameless, a foolish fantasy, but I can't control myself. I really love you so much." Arya thought that Ethan must be furious right now, so angry he wished he had never raised her. But where she couldn't see, Ethan's hand holding the phone slowly tightened, his heart pounding uncontrollably. In fact, he had known about Arya's feelings even before her impulsive confession on her birthday. The naive and innocent girl thought she had hidden it well, but her eyes were constantly betraying her secret. Of course, Ethan wouldn't respond to her. He could be with anyone, but not the girl he had raised himself. He could only silently distance himself from her, pushing her further and further away. And now, she had finally torn down that barrier. He pressed his brow tiredly. "Arya, you're too young, you don't even know what love is. I am your uncle, it's impossible for us." Chapter 10, hearing this answer, tears had already welled up in Arya's eyes. She tilted her head back, trying to stop them from falling. She gave a bitter smile. "Uncle Ethan, don't worry, I'm not confessing to you. I'm saying goodbye to you." Her voice seemed to drift from a distant place. "Uncle Ethan, I wanted to tell you that from now on, I don't love you anymore. I will never love you again. Thank you for raising me. I wish you a happy marriage. May you grow old with the one you love, year after year. I'm letting you go, and I'm letting myself go too." After saying that, she hung up the phone, broke the SIM card in half, and threw it into a trash can. Without looking back, she walked through the boarding gate. Long after the call ended, Arya's soft, pale voice still echoed in Ethan's ears. A terrible premonition washed over him. Arya had always been obedient and had never done anything out of line. Even after her last confession, a couple of harsh words from him had been enough to make her quickly find an excuse. Given her personality, she would never have made this call out of the blue. And what did she mean by she didn't love him anymore, that she was letting him go? He shot up from his chair and walked outside, his steps slightly unsteady. He was the one who had rejected Arya's confession, yet he was the one panicking first. Just as he grabbed his car keys, his secretary walked in with a stack of documents. "Mr. Hawthorne, the meeting starts in 10 minutes. Ethan was abruptly jolted back to his senses. What was he doing? As her uncle, as an elder, was he going to act foolishly along with her? He closed his eyes, forcibly suppressing the turmoil in his heart. "Let's go." The meeting lasted for an hour. During that time, Ethan tried repeatedly to focus on work, but his mind seemed to have a will of its own, filled with a single name. When the meeting finally ended, everyone in the room could see their boss was in a foul mood and didn't dare to speak. Ethan stood up, threw out a curt "meeting adjourned," and left. He didn't go back to his office, but went straight to the underground garage and drove off. In the car, he dialed Arya's number again, only to hear the same message. "The number you have dialed is unavailable." 10 minutes later, the car pulled up to Skywater Estate. He strode inside. The housekeeper was cleaning the living room and was surprised to see Ethan back so suddenly. "Sir, what brings you back?" "Where's Arya?" The housekeeper looked bewildered. "You don't know. The young miss left with her luggage early this morning." Ethan immediately strode upstairs and threw open her bedroom door, only to find it completely empty, except for the large cabinet filled with gifts. All of them were from him. His unease became reality. Ethan froze on the spot. With a deafening roar, his mind went blank. She left. Where did she go? A sharp pain lanced through his heart. Before he could even react, the phone rang. It was a call from the manor. Julian's frantic voice came through. "Uncle Ethan, Arya was taken away by her aunt this morning. She even canceled all her domestic identity information. It seems like she never plans on coming back." Chapter 11, by the time Ethan reached the airport, Arya was long gone. Dressed in a black trench coat, he stood amidst the bustling crowd, yet an overwhelming sense of loneliness washed over him. She was really gone, and she had left so decisively, so resolutely. Canceling her identity information, saying goodbye to no one, even blocking his number. The little girl from all those years ago had truly grown up. But what was he doing? He was the one who had tried every way to push her away. Now that Arya had finally let go, what was he so upset about? Ethan looked toward the boarding gates, a self-deprecating smile on his face as he silently turned and left. For some reason, his figure seemed unusually lonely from behind. "It's for the best that she's gone. Arya, don't ever appear before me again. Otherwise, I don't know if I'll be able to let you go a second time." 3 days later, Julian kicked open the door to Ethan's villa. The living room was empty. He went straight upstairs and kicked open the bedroom door, just as he expected, finding Ethan slumped in a corner, surrounded by scattered, empty red wine bottles. Ethan only lifted his head slightly. Seeing it was Julian, he lowered his head again, finished the wine in his hand, and threw the bottle forcefully to the ground. "What are you doing here?" If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, if Ethan's secretary hadn't called him in a panic saying she couldn't find Mr. Hawthorne, forcing him to come here, Julian would never have believed that his once lofty, cold, and noble uncle could fall into such a state of despair. It was as if he had become a completely different person. Julian's heart shook. He walked over and snatched the bottle from his hand. "Uncle Ethan, you haven't been to the office in 3 days. The board of directors is going crazy looking for you." Ethan's expression didn't change. He opened another bottle. "I told you, I'm on annual leave." "Uncle Ethan," Julian couldn't take it anymore and snatched the bottle again. "Since you took over the company, when have you ever taken a vacation just because Arya left? You have to reduce yourself to this state. If that's the case, why did you reject her in the first place?" Hearing the familiar name, Ethan's expression finally shifted for a moment. He frowned. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "You know best whether I'm talking nonsense or not, Uncle Ethan," Julian finally exploded, squeezing the words out through his teeth. "You didn't want me and Arya to be together, not because of some bullshit difference in status, but because you love her too. You love her even more than I do. You still have her picture in your wallet, Uncle. When are you finally going to admit it?" Ethan's breathing suddenly became ragged. Just when Julian thought he was about to deny it like he had countless times before, Ethan suddenly grabbed Julian's collar and roared, as if in self-abandonment. "Yes, I love her. I love Arya Garland. So what?" He roared it twice, finally releasing the feelings he had suppressed for decades. He loved Arya, but he didn't dare do anything, and could only personally force her away. Chapter 12. Julian was stunned. He sat down on the floor and started to laugh. "Uncle, you finally admit it. What kind of fate is this for us? An uncle and a nephew falling for the same girl?" As he spoke, his tone became dejected. "But I'm different from you. Arya has loved you since she was a child. Why could you be so cruel as to force her away?" Ethan's strength instantly drained away. He let go of Julian, his tone already calm again. "There's too much between us." Hearing this, Julian immediately said, "Uncle, you're my blood uncle, not hers. You have no blood relation at all. Why can't you be together?" Ethan shook his head. There were so many years between them. Arya was still so young, her feelings for him might not be that serious. Maybe it was just admiration, or maybe it was just a sense of unwillingness to give up. Not to mention, he had raised her since she was a child. If news of them being together got out, what would the outside world say about her? He never did anything he wasn't sure of. This was also why he had never dared to accept Arya in the past. If they couldn't be together in the end, what would happen to them? They would never speak again, become strangers. He wouldn't even be her uncle anymore. No, he couldn't even imagine a day when he and Arya would become strangers, because he loved her too much. "So, just let me be your uncle forever." But when this day truly came, he finally understood how much it hurt. After Julian's visit, Ethan finally seemed to return to normal. He was once again the meticulous, impeccably dressed, and unapproachable Mr. Hawthorne. Only, he never mentioned Arya's name again. Sometimes, when working late into the night, he would look out from the floor-to-ceiling windows of the top floor at the city's nightscape. The nightlife in Sutton City was always vibrant. Even at 2 in the morning, there were still people on the streets, and the stars in the sky shone down on those heading home. The urge to go find her would become irrepressible. But then he would remember the last words she had said to him that day, "Uncle Ethan, I'm letting you go, and I'm letting myself go too." Let her go. Fine. He had already been letting her go for over a decade anyway. A month passed in this mundane way. He buried himself in work day and night, not even returning to the Hawthorne Manor. It wasn't until Harrison Sr. laid down an ultimatum if he didn't come back, he need never come back, that Ethan finally took an afternoon off to return. The moment he arrived, Sylvia Vance was sitting beside his grandfather, chatting with him. When she saw Ethan, her eyes instantly lit up with delight. "You brat, you finally decided to show your face." Ethan handed his coat to a servant and sat down beside his grandfather. "I'm sorry, Grandpa, the company has been busy." Harrison Sr. huffed. "You're good at using that excuse to fob me off. But no matter how busy you are, you can't neglect your own fiancée." After a few more words, he said he was tired and had a servant help him upstairs, leaving space for the 2 younger people to be alone. Once the living room was empty except for him and Sylvia, Ethan knew why his grandfather had called him back. He suddenly felt a wave of exhaustion. At that moment, a pair of soft, delicate hands rested on his temples, gently massaging them. The pressure was actually quite comfortable, but he instinctively pushed the hands away. Sylvia looked helpless. "Ethan, I just saw that you looked so tired." Chapter 13, a thoughtful touch, innocent words, and a delicate, fragile face. If it were anyone else, they would have long since been captivated by Sylvia's gentle charms. Unfortunately for her, Ethan had no intention of being a gentleman. He had been so preoccupied with numbing himself with work that he had forgotten about the things Sylvia had done. He got straight to the point. "Sylvia, I did ask for your help in the beginning, but a week ago, I made it clear to you that you no longer needed to play the role of my fiancé and even sent someone to compensate you. I thought I had made myself clear enough. Your recent behavior of constantly visiting my grandfather and even whispering in his ear that I don't have time for you is highly inappropriate. I won't pursue it this time, but I hope you will stop here." With that, he stood up to leave, but the next second, Sylvia wrapped her arms tightly around his waist. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke urgently. "Don't go, Ethan. She's already gone. Can't you forget her?" Sensing the person he was holding stiffen, Ethan pried her hands off one by one and turned to face her. "Sylvia, that is my private matter. It has nothing to do with you." Watching him leave without hesitation, she finally bit her lip and sobbed. Time is a curious thing. It can be slow, like during the 3 years Ethan was abroad, where every day felt like a year. It can also be fast, like the 2 years since she left, passing in the blink of an eye, like sand through an hourglass. A plane left a trail across the blue sky and white clouds, proof that it had been there. When the plane landed in Sutton City, Arya looked at the familiar surroundings, still in a bit of a daze. It wasn't until her cousin, Leo Shaw, patted her on the shoulder that she came back to her senses. "What are you thinking about, little lady?" Leo Shaw's smile was as bright as the sun as he naturally took her hand and walked out with her. They looked incredibly close, like a couple to anyone who saw them. In the car, Leo looked eagerly at the scenery outside. "I haven't been back to Sutton City in years. It's changed so much." He was Lillian Garland's son, an American-born Chinese. Although he spoke Mandarin well, he hadn't been back to China in a long time since growing up. Everything was new and exciting for Leo. But for Arya, who had only been gone for 2 years, it felt like nothing had changed. She followed his gaze out the window. "Yeah, it has changed a lot. I never thought I'd be able to come back." When her aunt took her away and canceled all her domestic identity information, she had thought she would have to spend the rest of her life in America. That was fine. That way, she wouldn't run into anyone from her past. If it weren't for Leo needing to travel to various places to find inspiration for his work and repeatedly begging her to accompany him, she might never have returned here. After visiting dozens of cities, they had finally arrived here. Her hometown. Leo didn't catch the undertone in her voice and smilingly put an arm around her shoulder. "This is the place where you grew up, after all. You must have a lot of memories here. I've been craving the food here for so long. You have to take me to try everything these next few days." Living with her aunt these past few years, surrounded by family, had helped Arya let go of a lot of her emotional baggage, and her personality had become more cheerful. She smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, I'll be a great host." Chapter 14, for the next few days, Arya accompanied Leo all over Sutton City. Walking down the street, Leo's hands were full of bags, large and small, filled with food and souvenirs. "Arya, thank you so much for putting up with me these past few days." Arya smiled. "You did the same for me when I first arrived in the States." When she first moved to America, she was in an unfamiliar place and her aunt was very busy. Leo was the only one who accompanied her through that most difficult initial period, the period that helped her forget Ethan Hawthorne. Just as she was thinking about something, Leo spotted something else and ran off. Arya watched his retreating back with a chuckle. Sometimes she really thought Leo was like a child. He pointed at a promotional sign. "Arya, isn't that your uncle? He's giving a lecture here this afternoon." Arya looked up, and her expression changed. She didn't know how long it had been since she had last heard his name or seen his picture. Now, they had unknowingly walked to her alma mater. She had left for abroad so abruptly that she had only spent a year at Sutton University, so she wasn't particularly familiar with the place. And on the university's promotional sign was the news that Ethan Hawthorne was coming to give a lecture. Leo was intrigued and wanted to pull Arya inside. Arya instinctively wanted to refuse, but she couldn't resist Leo's insistence. She said helplessly, "Didn't you see that only students from the business management department of this university are allowed in?" Leo grinned, stuffed the things he was holding into Arya's hands, and left for a moment. In just a few minutes, he returned with 2 tickets. She stared at him, wide-eyed. "You didn't snatch these from someone, did you?" 5 times the price. There's no ticket this young master can't buy. Arya was at a loss and ended up accompanying Leo to the lecture. The lecture hall wasn't small, but it was packed. It seemed the entire department had come. After all, Ethan Hawthorne was not only a brilliant businessman, but also exceptionally handsome. For today's college students, who often prioritized looks, his face alone was enough to draw a massive crowd, even if they didn't listen to the professional knowledge. The lecture began soon. At first, the host was on stage, warming up the crowd with introductions. Leo watched with rapt attention, but Arya couldn't focus at all. The thought of the person she was about to see made her palms sweat. While the main speaker had not yet appeared, she made a gesture to Leo indicating she was going to the restroom and got up to leave. At the sink, she splashed handfuls of water on her face. "Arya, it's been a long time. When you left, he was already engaged. 2 years have passed now. He's probably married. What are you so nervous about? It's all in the past." After finally managing to clear her head, she grabbed a couple of paper towels, hastily wiped her face, and prepared to leave. As she walked down the hallway, she bumped into a man. The man was ordinary-looking, carrying a black backpack. After bumping into her, he didn't say anything, just looked a little unnatural, and then quickly left. Arya looked at him, feeling that something was strange, but she didn't dwell on it and continued toward the performance hall. She had only taken a few steps when 2 men in uniform stopped her. "We received a report that a scalper sold high-priced tickets and snuck into the lecture hall. Everyone must be searched now." Arya facepalmed. How could she have such bad luck? She reluctantly handed her bag to the police for inspection. "Officer, do I really look like a scalper?" The next second, when the police officer pulled out a stack of lecture tickets from her bag with a smile, Arya was completely stunned. Chapter 15, sitting in the school's break room, which was temporarily serving as an interrogation room, Arya was still in a daze. For the umpteenth time, she explained, "I'm really not a scalper. That man bumped into me and stuffed them in my bag." The police officer, holding a thermos, nodded as he took a sip. "Right. Keep making it up. You know there are no surveillance cameras in that area, so you can make up whatever you want, can't you?" What terrible luck. How could she be so unlucky? Arya sat helplessly on the chair, her phone confiscated. She wondered if Leo would come looking for her. Just then, the man sitting across from her suddenly stood up, his stern expression replaced by a polite, even friendly, smile. Arya was sitting with her back to the door, but she could feel someone had entered the room. A tall figure cast a shadow over her. A familiar, crisp scent wafted over. Arya's hands tightened as she heard a man speak from behind her. "Officer Zhang, thank you for your hard work." A familiar voice, deep, elegant, with a hint of nonchalance, yet inexplicably pleasant to hear. But she shivered, her breathing quickening. "It's my duty." "What brings you here, Mr. Hawthorne?" Officer Zhang shook his hand, puzzled. How could a simple case of a scalper warrant a personal visit from Ethan Hawthorne? Just how many tickets had she sold? His gaze toward Arya became even more severe. He saw Arya with her head bowed low, looking as if she was confessing her crime. Ethan walked around to stand in front of her. Looking at her guilty posture, a faint smile played on his lips. "I'm here to pick someone up." Officer Zhang assumed Ethan was picking up one of the performers and didn't think much of it. He waved his hand. "Then please go ahead, Mr. Hawthorne. We'll take this scalper to the station for questioning later." Ethan smiled and, looking at Arya, said, "That won't be necessary. I'm here to pick her up." "Pick up the scalper? Mr. Hawthorne, private interrogations are not permitted." Arya was mortified. At this moment, she would rather Ethan hadn't appeared at all. Being taken to the police station for questioning would have been better than facing this embarrassing situation. Only then did Ethan calmly explain, "Officer Zhang, you seem to have the wrong person. This is my kid." Just then, the school administrator who had just entered rushed in and said to Officer Zhang, "It was a mistake the real scalper was caught at the theater entrance." After speaking, he saw Arya and then glanced at Ethan, who was staring at her. He had also thought Arya was the scalper and had taken a photo of her to show Ethan. To his surprise, Ethan had only glanced at it before rushing to the break room. It seemed the two of them had a close relationship. After the whole matter was cleared up, Officer Zhang formally apologized to Arya and then left with the administrator for the theater entrance. Soon, only the two of them were left in the break room. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Ethan spoke first. "Let's go, I'll take you home." He tried to take Arya's arm, but she dodged him. Having recovered from the whole fiasco, Arya's small face was now polite but distant. "That's not necessary. I can get back by myself." But she had only taken 2 steps before Ethan grabbed her again, his tone softening. "Arya, it's raining outside. I'll take you home." Arya still refused. "No need. I can get a taxi." "Arya, do you have to be so distant with me?" Arya pulled her hand back and looked up at him, her eyes filled with a calmness she had never shown before. "Mr. Hawthorne, I just think I should keep my distance from an engaged man." Chapter 16. Watching her leave without a second glance, Ethan pressed his temples, a headache brewing. The little girl had learned to be ruthless from him. By the time Arya reached the school gate, Leo came running over and hugged her tightly, refusing to let go. "Oh my God, Arya, I finally found you. I thought I lost you at the lecture. You have the nerve to say that. Why didn't you look for me?" Leo looked innocent. "I wanted to go backstage, but they wouldn't let anyone in. Even offering money didn't work." Arya was exasperated. She looked up at the gloomy sky. Just as Ethan had said, it was raining. They hadn't driven here today. Arya took out her phone and opened a ride-sharing app. A minute later, she said in despair, "Great. There are 123 people ahead of you in the queue." It was always hardest to get a ride in the rain, especially near a university with heavy foot traffic. It would probably take an hour or 2 before it was their turn. Leo, however, was unfazed. He put his arm around Arya's shoulder and swayed. "Arya, don't you think it would be romantic for us to walk back?" "Yeah, getting soaked to the bone would be even more romantic." When Ethan came out, he saw the two of them looking so intimate. His eyes instinctively darkened. He instructed his driver to pull up in front of them. Seeing a limited edition Bugatti slowly stop in front of them, Leo whispered in Arya's ear, "Arya, I don't even have this car. Did the richest man in Sutton City come to the lecture too?" Then, Ethan rolled down the window. He didn't even glance at Leo, who was admiring his car, and spoke directly to Arya. "Get in." Leo was stunned. He looked at Arya with a hint of admiration. "Arya, you know the big shot who owns this car?" Arya gave Leo a helpless look. She didn't want to get in. She was about to say she was already waiting for a ride when Ethan anticipated her words. "If you're planning on waiting for a car here, I suggest you book a nearby hotel. You won't be getting home today." Arya was speechless. She wanted to refuse firmly, but she was immediately betrayed by her teammate. Leo enthusiastically said thank you to Ethan, then quickly opened the car door and pushed Arya inside. With 2 people already in the back, he sat in the passenger seat. The car moved slowly through the heavy rain. The atmosphere inside was quiet. Arya thought to herself, just maintain this quiet atmosphere. No one say a word. I'll get out and leave as soon as we arrive. Unfortunately, Leo was a social butterfly. It wasn't long before he couldn't help but turn around and ask, "Arya, aren't you going to introduce this handsome gentleman?" He had been secretly glancing at Ethan in the rearview mirror for a while. He had to admit, Ethan had a face that even he, who was used to seeing handsome men in North America, had to acknowledge as beautiful. Unfortunately, while the man was handsome, his aura was incredibly intimidating. And why did he look so familiar? Only then did Arya reluctantly speak. "This is my uncle." Then she said to Ethan, "This is Leo Shaw, my cousin." Leo's eyes widened. "So this is the uncle who raised you. He's the one on the lecture poster, at the university, right? He's even more handsome in person than in the photo. No wonder I didn't recognize him. Arya, you've been back for a while. Why haven't you gone to visit him? We don't do ingratitude, you know." Arya was rendered speechless, a lump forming in her throat, unsure how to explain. Fortunately, the car stopped at that moment. Arya immediately rushed to get out. Ethan stopped her, handing her a black umbrella, his tone overflowing with affection and concern. "Go slowly, don't get wet." Arya reluctantly took it. Just as she was about to walk forward, she froze. He had actually brought her back to the villa where he had raised her since she was a child. Chapter 17. Arya swore she never expected Ethan to grab her hand and lead her inside. How had his personality changed so much in just 2 years? Ethan, however, saw nothing wrong with it. He instructed the housekeeper to prepare ginger soup and dinner, settled Leo in, and then led Arya to her room. The moment the door opened, Arya was stunned. The furnishings inside, from the large furniture to the small dolls, hadn't changed at all, even though 2 years had passed. Her eyes reddened unconsciously, but when she looked at Ethan, she suppressed her emotions. "Uncle Ethan, why are you showing me this?" Ethan's voice was low and hoarse. "Arya, do you have to be so distant with me?" Arya bit her lip. "It's not about being distant. Uncle Ethan, I'm grateful for how you raised me. Thank you for everything. I was just immature before, which is why I developed inappropriate feelings for you. I'm grown up now. I won't cling to you anymore. So, you don't need to keep worrying about it like you did before. I don't love you anymore. I don't love you anymore. I don't love you anymore. I don't love you anymore." Her words echoed relentlessly in Ethan's mind. There was no hint of petulance, no trace of regret or unwillingness, just a simple, matter-of-fact statement. "I don't love you anymore." But it stirred a massive storm in Ethan's usually calm heart. A tearing pain spread through his body. His breathing grew ragged, and a crack appeared in his usually placid demeanor. He felt his heart ache so much he could barely breathe. Pain, more than the emotions governed by hormones and dopamine, was a more reliable way to confirm the existence of love. His love had been suppressed for 3 years, but the first sight of her had shattered his defenses. "Arya, the day you left, I actually went to the airport." He finally couldn't stop himself from grabbing her hand. A flicker of shock crossed Arya's face, but in the next second, she berated herself. "So what if he went to the airport? He doesn't love you." "Arya, stop being so sentimental." But Ethan continued, "By the time I got there, you were already gone. I didn't chase after you then, but I secretly told myself, since you left, never come back otherwise." The words he had suppressed for 3 years were about to be revealed, but Leo appeared out of nowhere, abruptly interrupting their conversation. "Uncle Ethan, Arya, when's dinner? I'm starving." It was as if Arya was suddenly jolted awake. She yanked her hand back and walked toward Leo. I'll go hurry them up for you." At the dinner table, Leo and Ethan chatted idly. Arya was still thinking about what had just happened, her heart trembling. She absent-mindedly picked up some vegetables in front of her, not even seeing what they were before bringing them to her mouth. The man sitting next to her stopped her. Ethan grabbed her wrist. "Arya, that's broccoli." Arya glanced down and saw that she had indeed picked up a large piece of broccoli. She quickly dropped it back into her bowl. She had hated broccoli since she was a child. One bite would make her want to vomit. She didn't expect Ethan to still remember that. And how could he be talking to Leo while paying attention to what she was eating? She picked up some green vegetables instead, and Ethan let go of her hand. The table returned to a quiet atmosphere. After dinner, ignoring Ethan's pleas for her to stay and Leo's desire to continue chatting, Arya said her goodbyes and quickly left the villa. Chapter 18. Night fell. Midnight Blue Bar. Stella was a regular at this bar. She was beautiful, had a killer figure, and was a great dancer, making her one of the most popular female patrons. Tonight, she spotted a prime catch. The man had broad shoulders and a narrow waist, wearing a black shirt with the top button undone, exuding a sexy, alluring vibe. He held a glass in his hand, and the silver watch on his right wrist caught Stella's eye. She raised an eyebrow. If she wasn't mistaken, a similar watch had just been auctioned in Paris last month for over $8 million. Tusk, what a rich guy. Stella flashed a confident smile, the one she considered her most charming, and walked toward him. "Hey, handsome, all alone?" She used her usual pickup line, her hand naturally coming to rest on his shoulder. Ethan rarely went to bars. He didn't often drink to get drunk and looked down on those who used alcohol to numb themselves at the slightest inconvenience. But today was an exception. Though he'd had a few drinks, he was far from drunk. The woman's cloying perfume assaulted his senses, and Ethan frowned slightly. Stella took his silence as acquiescence and leaned in closer. Seeing Ethan's face up close, her heart fluttered even more. She leaned in and whispered in his ear, her voice as soft as water, "I know a nice hotel nearby." It was a direct invitation. Stella assumed he was one of her kind and gave him a seductive smile. Hearing her words, Ethan set down his glass. Stella's heart leaped with joy, thinking he had agreed. But before she could say another word, the hand on his shoulder was flung off. Ethan's incredibly handsome face was filled with hostility, his eyes brimming with impatience. "Get lost." Stella froze, then anger flared. With her looks, when had she ever been rejected like this? She said, unwilling to give up, "You're not into me. Are you drunk? Did you not get a good look at my face?" Ethan just found her noisy. Without even looking up, he simply waved his hand. Soon, the bar manager came over. Seeing the indifferent Ethan and the lustful Stella, he immediately understood the situation. Cursing inwardly, he quickly stepped in front of Ethan. "I'm sorry, miss, this gentleman is not a customer." "Not a customer? Then why are you here getting drunk?" She couldn't stand rich people pretending to be something they weren't. Figuring she couldn't get him anyway, she said sarcastically, "If he's not a customer, what's he doing taking up space? What kind of bar are you running, letting just anyone in and ruining my chances?" The bar manager maintained a polite smile on the surface, but inside he was screaming for help. "Stop talking, stop talking, stop talking. This is our bar's major shareholder. The man our boss has to toast." Stella wanted to say more. The manager was considering whether to call security to escort this fearless young lady out before he got fired tomorrow. But it was clear Ethan wasn't thinking about that at all. The noise of the bar seemed to have nothing to do with him. He finished his last drink, stood up, and walked toward the door. Stella was still shouting after him, "Hey, where are you going? I'm not done yelling at you." 11:00 p.m. Arya was getting ready for bed. Just as she lay down, her phone suddenly rang. She picked it up. It was an unknown number. Not thinking much of it, she answered. Chapter 19, there was no sound from the other end for a long time. So long that Arya started to think her phone was broken. She couldn't help but speak up. "Hello, who is this?" Silence. Still silence. She glanced at her phone, wondering if it was some kind of midnight prank call. Horror movie scenes flashed through her mind. She shook her head, about to hang up. Finally, there was a sound from the other end. It was a voice she knew. "Arya?" It was thick and nasal. She could almost feel the drunkenness through the screen. Arya froze, then asked tentatively, "Uncle Ethan?" Ethan responded with a low, "Is there a reason you're calling me?" The other end fell silent again for a few seconds. After a long pause, Ethan's voice came through slowly. "You really don't love me anymore, do you?" Arya frowned. He called her in the middle of the night just for this. "Uncle Ethan, are you drunk? If there's nothing else, I'm going to sleep." She would have to be out of her mind to discuss this with a drunk person over the phone. Arya didn't hesitate and was about to hang up. In the split second before she did, she heard his last words. His voice was helpless and desolate. "But what can I do? I still love you so much." Arya's hand froze. Her fingers acted faster than her brain, and she pressed the end call button. The room returned to silence. She stood there, stunned. Did Ethan just say he loved her? There was no joy, only shock. Arya almost found it laughable. Ethan said he loved her? How was that possible? It was the biggest joke in the world. She still remembered with crystal clarity the phone call she made to him before deciding to go abroad. Back then, she had risked everything, asking him in such despair if he had ever liked her even a little bit. He had said no. He himself had said no. "No, I've only ever seen you as a child. I have never loved you." For a long time, those two sentences had been her nightmare. She dreamed that she confessed to Ethan again, and he would either reject her with cold rationality or have his arm around Sylvia, telling her to stop her foolish fantasies. How could a man like that possibly love Arya? She shook her head, unwilling to dwell on those painful memories. Now, she had finally managed to move on. Why should she let her heart be thrown into turmoil by his drunken words? Just as she was about to hang up decisively, Ethan's slightly pleading voice came through again, low and deep. "Arya, don't be angry with your uncle anymore, okay?" She bit her lip, about to speak, when the doorbell suddenly rang. She immediately hung up the phone, got up, and opened the door. Leo Shaw stood outside, a knowing, secretive look on his face as he leaned in close to Arya. "Arya, I knew there was something going on with you and your uncle. Spill, what did you two talk about?" She really didn't want to bring it up again and said evasively, "We were just catching up." "Really? But the way he looks at you is anything but simple," Leo said, looking like he knew everything. Arya was helpless. What are you talking about? He's my uncle. What could possibly be going on? What's wrong with him being your uncle? You're not blood related, and the way he looks at you is far from innocent. He wanted to analyze further, but seeing Arya's reluctance to continue, he handed her an invitation. All right, I came to you for something important. A good friend of my aunt's son is having an engagement party in a few days. My aunt wants me to go, but I have to see an art exhibition that day. I can't make it, so you go for me. Arya nodded without giving it much thought. Chapter 23 days later, she chose a small golden dress for the party. The gown was adorned with fine silver diamonds, shimmering like a galaxy. Coupled with Arya's natural beauty, she attracted a lot of attention the moment she entered, especially from some of the usual playboys. Sutton City was developing rapidly, and many previously unknown families now had a presence in high society. Many scions of these newly wealthy families were at the party. Since Arya hadn't been back in 2 years, many didn't recognize her. Seeing a beautiful woman arrive alone and unaccompanied, they naturally got ideas. Hello, beautiful. Care to get acquainted? Ryan Jones sized up the girl in front of him, blocking her path. Although he was trying to hit on her, there was little sincerity in his face, not even a shred of respect. In his mind, he had seen too many women like her aspiring starlets, young models, influencers, and the like, all trying every trick in the book to sneak into high society parties, hoping to charm their way into a wealthy connection. He categorized the lone Arya as one of them. His hand rested familiarly on her shoulder. How about a couple of drinks with me? A flicker of disgust crossed Arya's eyes. Just as she was about to react, a voice, as cold as ice, came from behind her. Get your filthy hands off her. Both of them turned around to see Ethan standing quietly behind them, his eyes fixed on Ryan's hand, as if he was about to twist it off in the next second. Mr. Hawthorne. Ryan stammered a greeting, a nervous smile on his face. He knew he was in trouble and quickly withdrew his hand. He might not know Arya, but he certainly knew Ethan Hawthorne. In fact, in a place like Sutton City, whether you were from an old, established family or a new money clan, everyone knew the Hawthorne family, and everyone knew Ethan Hawthorne. Damn it, did I just try to pick up Ethan Hawthorne's woman? Ethan's fury had been simmering since the moment he saw Ryan's hand on Arya's shoulder. He shot Ryan a look, the warning in his eyes unmistakable. This is the Stratford family's engagement party, not one of the nightclubs you frequent. A single sentence made Ryan's legs go weak. Ethan then took Arya's hand and led her away. Let go of me. It wasn't until they reached a quiet corner of the banquet hall that Arya finally broke free, rubbing her reddened wrist. She instinctively said, "Can't you be a little gentler?" The petulant tone in her voice was something even she didn't notice, but Ethan did. This was the first time since her return that she hadn't spoken to him with a deliberately polite and distant air. Ethan's eyes lit up, and most of his anger instantly dissipated. He reached out with both hands, gently took her reddened right hand, and began to massage it. His serious expression made her stare blankly for a moment, forgetting to pull her hand back. "Does it still hurt?" he asked gently. Arya finally snapped back to reality, her face flushing as she yanked her hand away. What are you doing?" The next second, she was enveloped in a cool embrace. Ethan, as if he'd gone mad, had pulled her into a hug, holding her so tightly she couldn't struggle free. Let me go, Ethan Hawthorne. Are you crazy?" This was probably the first time in her life she had called him by his full name. Though her tone was exasperated, Ethan found it incredibly pleasing. He buried his head in her waterfall of hair, feeling the exhaustion in his body and soul being soothed away. Chapter 21. He wasn't supposed to come to the Stratford family's engagement party. His family had already sent a gift, and besides, he was swamped with work. The entire burden of the Hawthorne Corporation rested on his shoulders alone, and for the past few years, he had generally avoided any non-essential social events. This time was supposed to be no different. He had worked almost all night and had a meeting scheduled today with several real estate developers from Sutton City. But just as he was about to leave, he got a call from Leo Shaw. The message was brief. The Elysian Hotel. Arya went to the Stratford's engagement party. Ethan frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" Leo just laughed and said, "Up to you if you want to go or not, uncle," before promptly hanging up. So, in the end, he came. It was pointless, really. The little girl wouldn't even give him a pleasant look. And yet, it seemed incredibly useful. Just seeing her seemed to make all his fatigue disappear. After 10 seconds, he released her, his expression natural as he straightened his slightly rumpled suit. When he looked at her again, his tone was perfectly proper. "Arya, have fun. I'll have my assistant stay with you." Arya was furious. What was he being so proper about? Who was the one acting like a rogue just now? "I don't want him. I want everyone associated with you to stay far away from me." Ethan didn't seem to mind her attitude. He just smiled warmly and strode out of the banquet hall. And then, he really did leave his assistant behind for the rest of the party. Assistant Miller followed her like a shadow she couldn't shake, terrified she might get into the slightest trouble. At 9:30, Arya, slightly tipsy, left the banquet hall. The shadow behind her was still there. She turned around in frustration. "That's enough. Stop following me. I'm going back to the hotel." Assistant Miller maintained a professional demeanor. "Miss Garland, Mr. Hawthorne instructed me that my job is not complete until I see you safely back to your hotel." "What job? I'm not part of your company." Arya, with a rare flash of her teenage petulance, ignored him, turned on her heel, and stomped away. Assistant Miller followed at a steady pace, reminding her, "Miss Garland, are you planning on walking back? Based on the distance and your walking speed, it would take approximately 4 hours. Are you sure you want to walk? Like boss, like employee?" Arya stopped abruptly and glared at him. "If you follow me one more step, I'm calling the police." The thought of that hug today, and Ethan's bizarre behavior of having his assistant follow her, had thrown her mind into chaos. All she wanted was to be alone to sort out her thoughts. What on earth does he mean? Is he just fulfilling his duty as an uncle to care for me? I don't need it. Just as Assistant Miller was about to speak, his phone rang. He answered it, and whatever was said on the other end made his face instantly tense. "What? Mr. Hawthorne passed out from drinking?" Arya, who had been about to leave, stopped in her tracks. Assistant Miller, no longer concerned with her, paced anxiously with his phone, shouting at the person on the other end. "You're useless. I told you to watch Mr. Hawthorne. Watch Mr. Hawthorne. Your job was to block drinks for him. Have you forgotten the time he drank until he had a bleeding ulcer?" A bleeding ulcer? Her heart skipped a beat. In Arya's memory, Ethan Hawthorne was an invincible figure who could solve any problem. He could drink until he had a bleeding ulcer. Assistant Miller hung up, desperate to rush over. Seeing Arya still standing there, he didn't know what to do. Arya said understandingly, "What are you still standing here for? I don't need you to take me home. Go get your Mr. Hawthorne." This was her chance to get rid of him. But while Assistant Miller wanted to rush back, he also remembered Ethan's instructions. He knew how much his boss treasured this Miss Garland, so he didn't dare to just leave. So, the bold Assistant Miller cautiously asked a question. "Miss Garland, would you like to come with me to check on Mr. Hawthorne?" Chapter 22, "Miss Garland, you truly are a saint." Assistant Miller eagerly pressed the elevator button for Arya, his face beaming with compliments. They were now in the elevator of Ethan's private villa. Arya frowned, trying to figure out what had possessed her to agree to this completely unreasonable request. It seemed there was no particular reason. Perhaps it was simply because Ethan was, after all, the uncle who had doted on her for so many years. Setting aside his attitude toward her feelings, he had always treated her exceptionally well. Even if they could never go back to the way they were, Arya couldn't bring herself to be that cold. Ding, the elevator doors opened. Arya took a deep breath. "Since I'm here, I might as well be gracious about it. I'll just check on him and show some concern as a junior, right?" Having mentally prepared herself, she stepped out after Assistant Miller opened the villa door. 2 steps inside, her eyes met those of the 2 people in the villa, and she froze on the spot. Ethan's face was indeed pale, no longer the picture of a professional elite from earlier in the day. Seeing Arya, he was clearly stunned, but he quickly realized this was a disaster. The atmosphere solidified. Sylvia Vance, standing beside him, quickly spoke up with a smile. "Arya, you're back in the country." After 2 years, Arya was no longer as quick to show her emotions. Even though her fingers were gripping her purse strap so tightly they had turned white, she still managed a smile in return. "Yes." Then she turned to leave, without a single glance at Ethan. Just before she left, she said, "Uncle Ethan, here's your assistant back. Don't have him follow me anymore." She walked away quickly, almost running to the elevator to press the button. She heard a hoarse, panicked Arya from behind her but didn't turn back, quickly stepping into the elevator and leaving. On the way back, she couldn't quite describe her feelings. What was so strange about Sylvia being at Ethan's villa? She was his fiancée. She herself was the one who shouldn't have been there. So sentimental. How could you be so sentimental? Why would Ethan ever be short of someone to care for him? It was strange. She had almost forgotten him. Before coming back to the country, she had rarely thought of him. But as soon as she returned, he seemed to be everywhere. In her life, in her mind, impossible to shake off. Arya looked up at the sky, taking several deep breaths of the cool night air to clear her head and suppress the stinging in her nose. She shook her head and hailed a taxi on the street. The next day, Arya lay in her hotel room until noon, thinking about nothing. The frustration in her heart had finally subsided a little. Unfortunately, some people just wouldn't let her be. "What is it?" she asked, looking coldly at the man outside her door, clearly not intending to let him in. Ethan still didn't look well. He had indeed drunk too much yesterday and had almost ended up in the hospital again. "Arya, can we go inside and talk?" "No." "Fine, then we'll talk right here. I'm not afraid of being seen." This reckless attitude left Arya helpless. She angrily threw her hands up and turned to let him in. Then she sat down on the sofa, picked up a magazine, and started flipping through it, completely ignoring him. She heard a sigh from above her, and then the sofa dipped beside her. He had sat down next to her. Arya instinctively tried to move away, but he held her hand. Chapter 23, Arya, I drank too much yesterday, and my assistant brought me back to the villa. Sylvia just happened to be there, he said, his voice laced with fatigue and a subtle, almost imperceptible plea for peace. But Arya just gave a cold, and pulled her hand back, continuing to look at the magazine. "I don't care. Why are you telling me this? It doesn't matter to me whether she just happened to be there or not." Ethan let out a soft laugh. "Arya, you have a tell when you lie. You can't look at people." Her hand, flipping through the magazine, paused. The sour feeling in her heart welled up. When she looked up, her eyes were already slightly red and wet. Ethan's heart clenched. "Arya, what is there to lie about? Do you think I should be questioning why Sylvia was at your villa? Is that what it would take for me not to be lying? She's your fiancé, Uncle Ethan. What are you explaining to me? Does your fiancé visiting you require an explanation to me?" She threw the magazine down and stood up to leave, but was immediately stopped by the person beside her. Ethan didn't dare provoke her further, but he didn't know where to begin his explanation. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer so steady. "She is not my fiancé." "What?" Arya clearly didn't believe him and shot back with a cold laugh. "Uncle Ethan, that lie is a bit too obvious, isn't it?" Back then, it was Sylvia who answered the phone and said they were engaged. Ethan had never denied it. And now he dared to claim it wasn't true. Seeing her disbelief, Ethan finally told her the truth. "It was my grandfather who liked her back then. Sylvia and I made a deal. I would give her the status of my fiancé, and she would help me with something." "What thing?" Looking at the little girl's red-rimmed eyes, he just said softly, "A work matter." He then pulled the standing girl back down to sit. "There's really nothing between us," he said, this time with earnestness and gravity. Unfortunately, Arya held a grudge. Her tone was mocking. "Then who was it that told me back then that Sylvia was a very important person, that he liked her very much?" Ethan froze. He only now remembered the huge pit he had dug for himself back then. The little girl was now a cat with its claws out, scratching at his heart with every word. He pressed his aching temples. Was he supposed to tell her that he had said that in a fit of pique? Ethan fell silent. But in Arya's eyes, this was him being speechless. It was clear that his relationship with Sylvia was more than just a deal. She didn't want to hear any more explanations and flung his hand away. "Uncle Ethan, you should go. We're a man and a woman alone here. And since you know I used to have feelings for you, it's not appropriate for us to be here together." The communication with Arya had once again ended in failure. When he returned to the company, Ethan's expression was even worse. He usually had the face of a cold-hearted king, but now the chill radiating from him was completely unrestrained. Employees scurried away at the sight of him. Assistant Miller didn't even dare to get close. Thinking about the scene from yesterday, he was utterly speechless with himself. How did he end up in the middle of such a dramatic confrontation? Yesterday, when Mr. Hawthorne found out that he was the one who had brought Miss Garland to the villa, the look in his eyes, wanting to kill him, was impossible to hide. But there was no choice. Work still had to be done. He held the documents and tremblingly placed them on Ethan's desk. Mr. Hawthorne, this is the project proposal submitted by the marketing department this morning. Ethan looked up, giving it only a brief glance. You can just approve it yourself. You seem to be quite good at making decisions, after all. It was over. He was so screwed. Assistant Miller's face was ashen, his smile more pained than a grimace. Mr. Hawthorne, I really know I was wrong. Chapter 24, Ethan scared him a little but had no real intention of doing anything to him. He dismissed him with a cold face, but he couldn't focus on the documents at all. He got up, feeling restless, remembering the sight of Arya's red-rimmed eyes looking at him. She looked so pitiful. He couldn't bear to let the distance between them continue to grow. When she was in America, he could control himself and not seek her out. But now she was here, standing right in front of him, no longer a phantom in his dreams or a fragment of his memory, but a real person. He closed his eyes, letting the surging emotions run wild, every second of it screaming Arya's name. What was the point of a life lived with over 30 years of clarity, control, and precision? It couldn't even hold on to the person he loved. This time, he really didn't want to miss his chance again. The gut-wrenching pain of losing her, the despair of waking up from a dream where he tried to grasp her smiling face only to find it was an illusion, he didn't want to experience that again. But Arya, if this time it's me who wants to take your hand again, will you be willing to give me another chance? A blind date. Looking at her aunt's gentle smile on the video call, Arya was surprised by what she had just heard. Aunt Lillian, you're saying you found a blind date for me? Lillian nodded on the screen and began to introduce him. He's my good friend's son, a very outstanding young man. He's been back in the country for a few years, works in finance, and is about your age. Arya, I think you should give it a try. Why? For some reason, she felt a strong resistance to the idea of a blind date. Lillian said helplessly, Arya, why haven't you dated at all these past few years? First, you tell me why. Arya fell silent. She knew what her aunt meant. Lillian had always been the one who understood her best. Although Arya seemed fine on the surface these past 2 years, it was only because she had learned to hide all her emotions and wounds deeper, so deep that no one could see them. But hiding a wound didn't mean it wasn't there. It still existed. The only way was to dig out those wounds, make her face them, heal them, instead of constantly running away. The first step was for Arya to try to accept another person. Knowing her aunt meant well, Arya hesitated for a moment before saying, I'll think about it. Lillian didn't push her, just said earnestly, Arya, besides your parents, I'm the person in this world who wants you to be happy the most. I really don't want to see you so sad again. Arya nodded, her voice choked with emotion. After hanging up, she stared blankly at the now quiet phone, accept another person into her life. Yes, she had already decided not to love Ethan Hawthorne anymore. So, of course, she should accept another relationship. But why did she still instinctively resist? Was it still because of Ethan? Arya couldn't deny that he was part of the reason. He was, after all, the person who had dominated her life for over a decade. But more than that, she lacked confidence in herself. One failed secret love was enough to crush all her confidence. Her mind was a jumble of thoughts. She didn't know what to do. Suddenly, she remembered some of Ethan's strange behaviors since she had returned. He seemed to have changed a lot. Chapter 25, he was no longer the person who deliberately distanced himself from her. In fact, he seemed to be intentionally trying to close the gap between them from the time he told the police officer, "This is my kid," to the inexplicable hug at the party. The more she thought, the more confused she became. She ran her hands through her hair in frustration. Since returning, it seemed everything was spiraling out of her control. This wouldn't do. She absolutely refused to go back to how she was 2 years ago. That's right. No matter what Ethan was trying to do now, she had already decided to let go of the past. Having finally made up her mind, she pressed her slightly aching temples. She felt exhausted from overthinking. It seemed every day since she returned had been tiring. She decided to rest first. She took a quick shower, and a few minutes after lying down, she fell asleep. The next day, Lillian called again with another video call from overseas, asking how her consideration was going. The person who had been so hesitant yesterday now gave a firm answer. Okay, I'll go on the blind date. The Hilton restaurant. Looking at the man in a suit and tie with gold-rimmed glasses across from her, Arya suddenly felt a little lost. Although she had promised her mother she would go on the blind date, she hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. The man was clearly well-mannered. Seeing Arya's unease, he didn't say anything that would make her uncomfortable. Instead, he handed her a glass of water. "Miss Garland, is there anything you'd like to eat?" He picked up the menu without looking at her, which gave Arya a moment to breathe. She took a small sip of water from the porcelain cup in front of her, and the feeling of awkwardness subsided a little. "Anything is fine with me." "Okay, then I'll order the house special for you. My friends and I come here often, and it's quite good. I hope you'll like it." Calb Stratford always had a gentle smile on his face. After putting down the menu, he finally started talking to Arya. "Miss Garland, you study classical dance, right?" Arya was a little surprised. This was the major she had taken up in America. "How did you know?" Calb Stratford sighed softly, a look of disappointment on his face. "Sigh, am I really that unmemorable?" "Arya, we were high school classmates." "Huh." Arya was completely bewildered. She stared at Caleb's face for half a minute before it finally dawned on her. "Calb Stratford?" "Right, Calb Stratford, you were in my year. What happened to you after high school? I never saw you again." The reunion of old classmates finally broke the somewhat awkward atmosphere. A genuine smile appeared on Arya's face. Caleb said, "I went to college abroad." "Oh, I see," Arya couldn't help but tease, "but you've definitely gotten a lot more handsome. It's not my fault I didn't recognize you right away. I never noticed before, but you're quite the sweet talker." The two of them instantly started chatting about their high school days, and Arya even forgot for a moment that she was on a blind date. Chatting with Caleb was incredibly comfortable. He was tactful, knew his limits, never crossed any boundaries, and always managed to find topics that interested Arya. The relaxed atmosphere lasted until a tall figure strode into the restaurant and stopped beside her. Chapter 26. Ethan wasn't alone. He was with two business partners. Seeing Arya smiling radiantly at a strange man was a sight that was simply too jarring. He had the waiter lead the other two into a private room before he walked over to Arya. "Arya, what are you doing here? And who is this?" Seeing Caleb, a sense of crisis instinctively rose within him. For some reason, Arya felt a little guilty the moment she saw him. Before she could speak, Caleb had already stood up and extended his hand to Ethan. "Mr. Hawthorne, I've heard so much about you. I'm a friend of Arya's, Calb Stratford." Calb Stratford. Ethan looked at him coldly, mulling over the name. It felt somewhat familiar. Seeing Ethan's expression, Caleb guessed he probably didn't recognize him and introduced himself further. "My father is Harrison Stratford of the Genuine Group." Hearing that name, Ethan immediately knew who he was, the youngest son of the Stratford family, and he knew Arya and was chatting so happily with her. He extended his hand in return. "So you're Mr. Stratford's son? A pleasure, Ethan Hawthorne. I have guests waiting. Please enjoy your meal." The clients were still waiting, so Ethan couldn't stay long. He glanced at Arya before leaving. For some reason, she felt that his last look was a bit dangerous. Perhaps because Ethan had interrupted them, Arya was a little listless for the rest of the meal. Feeling that her subdued mood wasn't appropriate, she excused herself to the restroom to compose herself. On her way out of the restroom, she got a call from Lillian, asking how things were going. Arya said helplessly, "Aunt Lillian, have you ever heard of a blind date getting results on the same day?" After hanging up, she was about to head back to the restaurant when a large hand suddenly grabbed her, and she was slammed against the wall. Ethan stared at her, his eyes bloodshot. He spat out each word. "You're on a blind date?" He was furious. A crack appeared in his usually calm facade, a rare loss of composure. Looking at his agitated state, Arya suddenly felt calm. Unlike before, she didn't struggle. She quietly admitted, "That's right." "You dare?" He slammed a hand against the wall, as if he wanted to leave a dent. "Come with me right now." "I'm not going." Arya took a deep breath and finally said what was on her mind. "Uncle Ethan, in what capacity are you trying to control me now? My aunt arranged this blind date for me. Do you have a problem with that? What's wrong with Calb Stratford? He's my age, humorous, and well-mannered. I'm quite satisfied with him." "Satisfied? Every word Arya said hit one of Ethan's raw nerves, completely oblivious to the danger she was courting. Seeing the veins popping on Ethan's forehead from anger, Arya felt a strange sense of satisfaction and continued. Uncle Ethan, you should just manage your own fiancé. I don't need you to manage me. Who I go on a blind date with, who I marry, has nothing to do with you. Ethan closed his eyes, suppressing the fury in his eyes. Fine, very fine, blind dates, marriage, and it has nothing to do with him. Ethan Hawthorne, your karma has really come for you. He opened his eyes, said no more, and grabbed Arya's wrist, pulling her outside. Seeing him truly enraged, Arya finally started to panic. She struggled with all her might, but it was futile. She was dragged into his car by Ethan. After getting in, the driver, who had been waiting, saw his boss suddenly bring a woman in, radiating pure rage. Mr. Hawthorne, this is... Get out. Driver, yes, sir. Chapter 27, the driver quickly got out of the car, leaving just the two of them inside. Arya shook off his hand and turned to open the car door, but it was already locked. What on earth are you doing? Let me out. A warm sensation on her lips cut her off. The rest of her words swallowed whole. In that instant, Arya's entire body went rigid. She didn't even register what Ethan was doing to her. And in the few seconds she was dazed, he was no longer content with just their lips touching. He breached her defenses, effortlessly conquering her. It wasn't a gentle kiss, it was one laced with anger. MMPH. By the time Arya snapped out of it, her whole body was fighting back, but Ethan refused to let her go. Even after she bit him hard, he only frowned slightly and didn't stop. After what felt like an eternity, he finally released her. By now, Arya had no strength left to struggle. She leaned limply against the back seat, gasping for breath, her red lips slightly swollen, tears welling in her eyes, threatening to fall. Ethan leaned in again. Arya instinctively put her hands to her chest, terrified of what he might do next, but he only moved closer to her ear and whispered. His expression was almost pleading. Arya, don't make me angry. Otherwise, I really don't know what I might do. What a threatening tone. Arya's tears finally fell. Enraged, she looked at the man before her. Smack, a sharp slap landed across his face. The force of it turned Ethan's head slightly to the side. A few seconds later, seeing the helplessness and hatred in Arya's eyes, he gave a self-deprecating smile. Hit me, hate me, I don't care. But I will not let you be with someone else. Tears streamed down her face. Ethan tried to wipe them away, but Arya wouldn't let him touch her. She wiped her own tears away haphazardly. On what grounds? Uncle Ethan, do you know what you were just doing? Haven't I always been just a child in your eyes? You forcibly kiss a child? You've already rejected me. Stop this. Stop giving me any hope, please. I was finally letting go. I'm begging you. Looking at the little girl's pleading face, Ethan finally conceded, completely tearing down his proud facade. Forget it, he had long since surrendered to her. He gripped her hands tightly, kissing away her tears as he murmured, Arya, I love you. Your uncle loves you. I've loved you for longer than you've loved me. Please don't be scared, okay? I can't hide it anymore. I know I'm being selfish. I had decided to let you go, but I can't stand to see you with someone else. You shouldn't have come back. You're really going to be the death of me. If the forced kiss had been a physical shock, then these words were a blow to Arya's very soul. Love. Ethan actually said he loved her. She had loved him for 12 whole years. 9 years of silent love, and 3 years after her confession. He had never given her a single response. But now, the person who had once treated her feelings with disdain was telling her he loved her. What a massive irony. Anyone in the world could say they loved her, but not Ethan Hawthorne. What right did he have to love her? Arya's lips twitched into a smirk. She pushed his hands away. Uncle Ethan, if you're joking, it's not funny at all. Chapter 28, knowing she would try to escape, Ethan forced her to meet his gaze again. Arya, look at me. I'm not joking. I love you, more than you love me. Her 18th birthday, the night that young girl, slightly tipsy, had confessed to him. That night, Arya thought she was the only one who had stayed up all night, but she didn't know that Ethan had too. Except, Arya was crying over a failed confession. And Ethan was struggling in a battle between emotion and reason, not even daring to close his eyes. The moment he did, he would see the image of the little girl, blushing as she confessed to him. Uncle Ethan, I want to be with you. It's not just you, I want it too. For a long, long time, I've been waiting for you to grow up. waiting for my little girl to grow up and fall into my arms. He loved her to the point of madness. He loved her so much that he had to constantly distance himself from her, even leave the country, just to suppress this feeling. And now, the little girl who had once confessed to him with such reckless abandon had lost that fearless courage. She looked at him with extreme coldness and asked seriously, "Uncle Ethan, is it because you found out I don't love you anymore, and now your pride is hurt?" Other than that answer, Arya couldn't think of any other reason. It had to be because of his pride, it couldn't be because of real love. If he really loved her, how could he have hurt her so badly back then? Hearing this, all the passionate emotions surging in Ethan's heart instantly cooled. She actually thought of him that way. He leaned in closer and whispered, "What did you say?" Arya was not afraid. "Uncle Ethan, if it's because of your pride, you really don't have to do this. Even if we're not together, you're still my uncle, and I will still respect you." Respect? Who wanted her respect? Ethan was about to suspect the little girl was doing it on purpose, deliberately trying to anger him. "It's not because of pride, I just love you. Arya, will you give me a chance?" Arya's coldness faltered under his intense gaze, but she still stubbornly said, "No." He knew that would be her answer. Ethan smiled helplessly. The little girl wasn't that easy to coax. He hadn't planned on forcing her today, but he had been so incensed by her going on a blind date that he couldn't stop himself from doing what he had long wanted to do. After that, he said no more, got up, and moved to the driver's seat. She was sent back to the hotel in a daze. It wasn't until she was sitting in her room that Arya suddenly remembered she had left Calb Stratford at the restaurant. She quickly called him to apologize. Fortunately, Calb didn't mind her rudeness and instead asked what had happened. There was no way Arya could tell him she had been carried off by a madman. She had to make up an excuse, conveniently using Leo. "I have a friend from America. He's all alone here and he suddenly got sick today, so I had to rush over." Calb was very understanding. "Is your friend okay?" Arya nodded guiltily. He's fine. "I'm so sorry about this time. I'll treat you to dinner next time." "It's okay. You must be tired now. Get some rest." "Okay." After hanging up, her mind went blank. She couldn't stop thinking about the kiss from earlier today and what Ethan had said. He actually said he loved her and had loved her since her confession. It was as fantastic as a fairy tale. Arya lay dazed on the sofa. Just then, Leo walked in from outside. Seeing Arya looking spaced out, he smiled and leaned in. "Arya, what are you daydreaming about?" Chapter 29, Seeing Leo. Arya's desire to confide in someone became overwhelming. She thought to herself that Leo had plenty of relationship experience and might be able to help her analyze the situation. So she began with difficulty. "So, I have this friend?" Leo couldn't help but laugh. After getting a glare from Arya, he quickly put on a serious expression and continued to listen. She used to really like this person for many years, but he never responded to her feelings. Finally, she decided to stop liking him and Heartbroken went abroad. But after she came back, the person she used to like started seeking her out again and even said he liked her. "What do you think is the reason for that?" After she finished, she looked at Leo expectantly. Leo listened, digested it for a moment, and then looked at her with a grin. "Arya, so your uncle confessed to you?" Busted immediately, Arya felt a little embarrassed. "How did you know it was my uncle?" Leo said matter-of-factly, "I've known he likes you since the first time I met him. He's hostile to every man who gets near you, especially a handsome and rich guy like me." The way Ethan had looked at him that day still made Leo a little scared just thinking about it. Arya was speechless at his narcissism and steered the conversation back to her question. "So what do you think he means?" Leo shrugged and suddenly adopted a serious expression. "Arya, let me ask you first. When you first arrived in America, were you crying every day because of him?" Back when they first met, Leo had never seen someone cry all day long without saying a single word to anyone. Remembering that time, Arya nodded silently. Seeing her dejected look, Leo sighed and patted her head. "Arya, if it were me, I would never go back to someone who made me so sad. But," he changed his tone, "you're completely different from me. I'm used to playing the field. Even if I let go this time, I can quickly fall for someone else. But what about you? In your 20-plus years of life, you've only ever loved him." People who love deeply are bound to get hurt, and Arya was exactly that kind of person. After loving someone so profoundly, she was simply unable to fall for anyone else. But Arya disagreed. She explained, "I've already started going on blind dates." "Really? Are you planning on getting together with your blind date?" She immediately fell silent. Leo patted her shoulder. "So, my opinion is not a reference for you. No one's opinion is a reference for you. Arya, you can only follow your heart. Either choose to trust him again or completely sever this relationship." Leo left, giving her a quiet environment to think. In the silence, her phone rang again. Arya's mind was in turmoil. She answered without looking at the number. The person on the other end spoke, and it was someone she completely did not expect. "Arya, are you free? I'd like to talk to you." It was Sylvia. Chapter 30. Arya said, "What is there for us to talk about?" The person on the other end of the line laughed. "About your uncle, of course. Didn't you used to like him a lot?" Boom, a clap of thunder went off in her head. Sylvia knew she used to have a crush on her uncle. Her hand holding the phone tightened. "What do you mean by that? Are you afraid to see me?" "I suppose so. You've never dared to face me. After all, even though you're so young, I still managed to snatch away the uncle who protected you your whole life. No matter if it's been 2 years or how many years, you will always be my defeated opponent." Sylvia finally dropped her pretense, her words dripping with sarcasm and undisguised malice. But where Arya couldn't see, no one could see the deep jealousy hidden in her eyes. Arya's hand trembled, but she forced herself to stand her ground. "If you really won so completely, why would you be so flustered as to call and provoke me?" Click, she hung up immediately after speaking and tossed the phone onto a corner of the sofa. The person who had been hesitating just moments before suddenly had a determined look in her eyes. She didn't want to get caught up in this messy love triangle anymore. No, it wasn't even a triangle. He and Sylvia had always been an enviable couple. It had always been her, singing a one-woman show. She didn't want to be that fool whose every heartstring was pulled by someone else anymore. This time, she was really going to let go of the past. After that day, she didn't seek out Ethan again, and Ethan couldn't find Arya either. Her phone number was blocked, and when he came to the hotel, she refused to open the door. She kept hiding like this until Calb Stratford invited her to be his date for a wedding. The wedding was on an island not far from Sutton City. But as one could imagine, this wedding was for someone in Sutton City's high society circle, so Ethan would definitely be there. This time, Arya couldn't avoid him. They were bound to meet. She thought to herself that since she was planning to go back to America soon anyway, she would just treat it as a final meeting. That day, everyone took a cruise out to sea. Arya, in a white dress, stood outside, feeling the sea breeze, her heart at peace. Then, a familiar, crisp scent came from beside her. It was Ethan. She knew, but she didn't open her eyes. Ethan stared at her delicate, fair profile, his eyes a mixture of love and resentment. He didn't know how this little girl could be so heartless. But then he remembered his own past behavior towards her and could only give a bitter smile. Karma, indeed. "Arya, let's talk." Arya opened her eyes and looked at him. "Sure, what does Uncle Ethan want to talk about?" Her cooperative attitude was somewhat unexpected, but although she was smiling, Ethan had a bad feeling. "You've been avoiding me lately. Is it because of what I said last time?" Arya looked at the calm sea and said faintly, "Uncle Ethan, to be honest, I don't know why you would say you love me. I loved you so much before, and you never gave me a single response. You would only hide from me, completely distancing yourself from our relationship. Tell me, should I believe that you love me?" Seeing her sad expression, Ethan's heart ached. He had indeed done many things to hurt her in the past. "Arya, it was my fault before. I admit, I wasn't brave enough back then." "Uncle Ethan, you weren't not brave enough. You just didn't trust me enough, right?" she asked calmly, continuing, "You didn't believe my feelings for you were real. You thought I was just being impulsive and didn't want to play along." Even though it hurt, she still said it, a stinging sensation in her eyes. She closed them again. "Uncle Ethan, let's just leave it at this. Let's not end up with no relationship at all." Chapter 30. A wave of panic surged from the bottom of his heart. Ethan had never been so certain that he was about to lose something. He reached out to take Arya's hand, but she dodged him. "Arya?" Just then, Caleb's searching voice came from behind. "Arya?" Arya immediately turned around, no longer looking at Ethan. Caleb looked at the atmosphere between them, finding it a bit strange, but he simply walked to Arya's side and asked, "Arya, I've been looking for you everywhere." What are you doing here? Nothing, just getting some air. Let's go, Arya said nonchalantly, quickly leaving with him. Ethan watched their retreating backs from behind, looking so harmonious, natural, and perfectly matched. The suffocating feeling in his chest grew stronger. Upon arriving at the island, the group of young masters and socialites had a blast. Arya, however, was listless. No matter how carefree she acted in front of Ethan, she couldn't ignore the ache in her heart. So she simply stayed in the hotel, too lazy to go out, just sitting in the lobby and watching the scenery outside. Calb sat beside her, looking at the dejected girl. After a moment of silence, he finally asked, "You and Mr. Hawthorne, were you a couple before?" Arya shook her head. "A couple, how could that be? I just used to like him, but he didn't like me," she said calmly, looking at the view outside. Didn't like her? Calb didn't believe it. The way Ethan acted didn't seem like he didn't like her. But he clearly had no intention of explaining things for Ethan. He looked at Arya, suddenly thinking back to their high school days. He had actually noticed Arya back then, but at that time, she never paid attention to anyone else, completely oblivious to all other gazes. Perhaps this was a chance given to him by fate. After much thought, Calb finally spoke. "Arya, then are you willing to give me a try?" Arya suddenly froze. Caleb's sudden confession caught her off guard. "You're not just pitying me, are you?" Her reaction made Calb laugh. He said helplessly, "Do I look like such a kind person?" "Arya, I actually liked you in high school. The blind date, I was the one who suggested it to my mother. I know maybe you still have someone else in your heart right now, but that's okay. I can wait." His expression was serious, not a hint of joking, and the emotion in his eyes seemed genuine. Arya stiffened. She felt flustered. "Why are you suddenly telling me this?" Calb chuckled. "I just feel like now is a good time." Looking at his sincere eyes, Arya was at a loss. Although she had said she was satisfied with Calb to spite Ethan, she had just blurted it out in anger. Calb was indeed a great guy, in every aspect. Maybe dating him could really help her forget Ethan completely. But did she really want to get into a relationship with someone else for the purpose of forgetting Ethan? That would be too unfair to Calb. She shook her head. "I'm sorry, my mind is a mess right now. I can't give you an answer." Calb reached out, and in the first slightly over-the-line gesture since they'd met, gently patted her head. "It's okay, Arya. I'm not forcing you to give me an answer. I just wanted to tell you that I like you." Arya looked up and happened to see Ethan walk into the hotel lobby. She froze, then remembered Caleb's hand was still on her head, but she didn't refuse. Ethan glanced at them, then averted his gaze and walked past, as if he hadn't seen Arya at all. They had finally returned to their former relationship. That was good, Arya thought, deliberately ignoring the sour feeling in her heart. This was the best ending. Chapter 32, the party was set for 3 days, with all the wedding ceremonies scheduled for the 3rd day. After 2 days of wild partying, the main event finally arrived. During these 2 days, Arya and Ethan hadn't exchanged a single word. Even when they occasionally bumped into each other, one of them would always find an excuse to leave first. Even Leo, who was just there for the free food, noticed something was off between them. In the quiet room, he handed Ethan a glass of wine. "Uncle Ethan, what's going on with you and Arya?" Ethan downed the whiskey in one go. "She's avoiding me." Leo had pieced together the whole story over the past few days and sighed. "Uncle Ethan, if you ask me, this is the mess you made for yourself back then. Now it's your turn to win her back." "Win her back? How?" Ethan shook his head. He remembered seeing her with Caleb in the lobby that day. God knows how much strength it took for him to suppress the urge to twist Caleb's hand off and just walk past them. She had better options, people her own age, people more suitable for her. But that person would not be him. The wedding ceremony went by quickly, and soon it was time for the evening banquet. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. Arya was beautiful, and many people came up to her for a drink. With matters weighing on her mind, she accepted every toast, drinking one glass after another. Caleb had to leave the island after the wedding for a company matter and didn't attend the banquet, after saying goodbye to Arya. As for Leo, he was busy drinking with a group of socialites and had long since disappeared. As night fell, no one was paying attention to her. Arya drank to her heart's content. Her tolerance for alcohol wasn't bad, but by now she was quite drunk. With the last ounce of her consciousness, she clutched a bottle of red wine and staggered to the elevator, wanting to go back to her room. The elevator stopped, the doors opened, and she swayed to a room door and pushed it open. She didn't realize it wasn't her room. The room was pitch black. She didn't turn on the lights but walked straight in, casually placing the wine bottle on a table. Then she started taking off her clothes, frowning and muttering to herself. What kind of dress is this? Why won't it come off? After struggling for a while to no avail, she gave up. She reached into her dress, pulled out her strapless bra, and tossed it onto the bed. Then, still in her little dress, she climbed into bed. In the darkness, she closed her eyes and hugged a pillow, restlessly snuggling against it. Chapter 33. Ethan had a dream. In the dream, the person he had been thinking about day and night had actually appeared in his bed, holding him tightly. In the darkness, her hand rested on his chest, restlessly exploring, while her lips mumbled something. Such a hard pillow. He couldn't tell if it was a dream or a fantasy. He only knew the scent of the young woman was right there. He grabbed her wandering hand and stared intently at Arya's face in the dark. Though he couldn't see, Arya's bright features seemed to be right before his eyes. He cleared his dry throat, his voice laced with a self-deprecating laugh. Not even letting me go in my dreams? Arya had no idea what he was saying. She just felt uncomfortable that her hand was being held. But hearing Ethan's voice, which felt so familiar, she instinctively leaned closer to him. I want a hug, the pillow. As she spoke, her body and face kept snuggling closer. This pillow was hard, but she inexplicably liked it. She continued to hold it and move around, her lips brushing against Ethan's eyelashes, sending a shiver through him. Then she nuzzled his nose with her own. Soon, he felt himself becoming aroused. The person who had been untouchable during the day was now right in front of him. Moreover, he himself was half drunk and half asleep. Just as Arya's lips were about to brush against his, Ethan, with a fierce determination, grabbed her wrist and pinned the restless girl beneath him. He leaned down and placed a solemn kiss on her brow. Arya, I love you. Arya was deeply intoxicated. Not only did she not resist, but she actively wrapped her arms around his waist. He gently kissed her delicate features, his body pressing down on hers. The evening breeze blew in through the slightly ajar window, making the white sheer curtains billow. The room was filled with a sensual atmosphere, punctuated by occasional soft moans and cries of pain, adding a touch of enchanting color to the silent night. At 9 a.m, the headache from the hangover woke Ethan up. Looking at the messy room, fragments of last night's memories played back in his mind, frame by frame. He had gotten drunk yesterday, and then, with Arya, suddenly, a thought struck him. He turned to look at the empty space beside him. The obedient, gentle person from last night was gone. The room was empty except for him. Arya was gone. He rubbed his forehead in frustration, then swung his legs out of bed. The first thing he did was grab his phone and call his assistant at the company. Keep an eye on the hotel. If Arya goes back, call me. Also, she'll probably head to the airport. Arrange for 2 people to wait at the airport. After hanging up, he sat on the edge of the bed, his hands hanging limp, a faint, bitter smile on his lips. It was a mix of pain and relief. He knew Arya too well. After something like this happened between them, her first choice would be to run. This time, she would probably leave without a word again. Except, this time, he would never let her go. Chapter 34. At the airport, Arya, having hastily left the island, had indeed gone straight back to the hotel, grabbed a few things, and left with her suitcase. She didn't even take Leah with her. She sat in the departure lounge, and the thought of what she had seen when she woke up this morning made her want to jump into the sea. She had gotten drunk last night and gone into the wrong room. And not just any wrong room, but Ethan's room. The marks all over her body and the faint ache were constant reminders of what had happened last night. Looking at Ethan's peacefully sleeping face, Arya had almost instantly made a bold decision run. It's fine. It was just a drunken one-night stand. We're adults. It's normal. She comforted herself while waiting for the boarding announcement. Just as she was lost in her dream of a carefree life back in America, Assistant Miller's appearance shattered her fantasy. Miss Garland, Mr. Hawthorne is waiting for you outside. Assistant Miller was all smiles, with 2 men in black suits standing behind him. Boom, a clap of thunder went off in her head. She swallowed hard and quietly reached for the backpack containing her plane ticket. I'm not going back with you. Her movements clearly didn't escape Assistant Miller. With a polite smile, his hand shot out and unapologetically took her bag, handing it to one of the bodyguards. "Mr. Hawthorne said that if Miss Garland doesn't cooperate, he will personally come and carry you back." Carry her back? In front of all these people at the airport, she might as well just cease to exist. A Bugatti was parked outside the airport. Ethan sat alone in the car, his gaze fixed on the airport exit. A chill emanated from his handsome face, and a small bandage was oddly stuck to his jaw, a scratch from a certain little cat last night. A short while later, Arya came out, following Assistant Miller. The little girl walked with a sullen expression, her unhappiness written all over her face. The car door opened, and Assistant Miller brought Arya to him, then left with the bodyguards without a word. The car was silent. Although they were sitting in the same row, Arya was practically plastered to the car door, as far away from him as possible. Ethan rubbed his temples and took the initiative to speak. "You run pretty fast." Arya couldn't help but retort, "Not as fast as you catch people." A soft chuckle echoed in the car. Arya turned to glare at him, but when she saw the bandage on his chin, she fell silent, an unnatural blush creeping up her face. Ethan took the opportunity to move closer. "Arya, do you remember what happened yesterday?" Arya trembled with anger. He actually had the nerve to ask. Her face was as red as a beet. After a long pause, she threw caution to the wind and said, "Nothing happened yesterday." "I'll just pretend I was bitten by a dog." She said it with great bravado, but as she felt the man's presence beside her become increasingly dangerous, her voice trailed off. You were the one who asked me." Knowing he wouldn't get any pleasantries from her, Ethan didn't push her further and changed the subject. "Arya, actually, I have another reason for keeping you here. The theater jointly built by the Hawthorne Group is about to open. I want you to be the first to perform on its stage. If you can make a name for yourself with this performance, you'll be able to participate in the Minkiwi Cup competition in the latter half of the year. Don't you want to stand on the stage of the Minkiwi Cup?" Chapter 35 The Minkiwi Cup. It was the hallowed hall for all classical dancers. To even participate was a mark of being a master in the field. Her teacher in America, the nationally renowned dancer Madame Chen, was one of the judges for the Minkiwi Cup. The competition was held only once every 4 years. Forget winning. Just being able to perform on that stage was an affirmation for any dancer. Arya hesitated. "But I'm a newcomer." Ethan's tone was gentle. "You can start practicing now. There's still time. Arya, you love dancing, don't you? Do you really want to give up this opportunity? Whatever you want, I will give it to you." Seeing his serious expression, Arya wavered. Seeing that she was moved, a light flashed in the man's eyes. He pressed his advantage. "Arya, as long as you agree to stay, I will personally contact your teacher from America, Madame Chen, and bring her here to be your exclusive personal instructor." "My teacher," her voice was filled with delight, but then she asked hesitantly, "Would Madame Chen be willing to teach only me?" Looking at the little girl's joyful eyes, Ethan secretly took her hand and nodded. "Yes, she will definitely be willing." If she could get one-on-one instruction from Madame Chen, her skills would certainly improve a lot. Arya was tempted. Suddenly, she realized how close the man had gotten to her. And when had her hand been taken by him? Arya pouted and tried to pull her hand away, but Ethan wouldn't let go. Not only did he not release her, but he also pulled her into his arms. He shamelessly buried his head in the crook of her neck, his tone almost pleading. "Arya, stay, please, I'm begging you." She knew he was up to no good, first offering her a performance and then helping her contact her teacher. Arya pushed him a couple of times, but he didn't budge. She felt a mix of anger and helplessness. Was this still the decisive uncle from before? "Let go." "No." His roguish behavior left Arya at a loss. She thought about what had happened between them. "You don't think you can take advantage of the situation?" Ethan nodded. "So you're agreeing to stay?" He smiled inwardly. This was his main goal. As long as Arya was willing to stay, there would be a way to solve the problems between them. Thinking about the Minkiwi Cup and Madame Chen, Arya couldn't bring herself to say no. "I can stay, but I have one condition." "A condition?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Name it." Arya's voice was soft. "What happened yesterday, we'll pretend it never happened. You're not allowed to bring it up again." Feeling the person buried in her neck stiffen, Ethan slowly lifted his head, his gaze not friendly. "What did you say?" Her heart pounded, but she still summoned her courage. Anyway, you're not allowed to mention it, and you're not allowed to tell anyone. Ethan chuckled. The little girl was afraid he would use this to threaten her. He poked her forehead, his tone a mix of helplessness and resignation. I can agree not to mention it, but pretending it never happened, that might be a bit difficult, Arya. He pointed to his chin and leaned closer to her face, his tone full of ambiguity. You left this evidence yourself. Chapter 36. Arya turned her head away, ignoring him. In the end, she was taken back to the hotel. Ethan was busy with company matters and didn't stay long. After seeing her out of the car, he returned to the company. Before leaving, he carefully instructed her. I'll take you to see Madame Chen in a few days, Arya pouted. She's my teacher. Why do I need you to take me? Not arguing with her, Ethan replied with a smile. All right, your teacher. Seeing the triumphant smile on his lips, Arya realized her tone had sounded too much like she was pouting coquettishly. She blushed, turned around, and shut the door. Although Madame Chen was a master in the world of classical dance and nearly 60 years old, she disliked fanfare and a lavish lifestyle. The reason she stayed in America was because of her husband. Now, brought back to the country by some means Ethan had employed, she lived in the same courtyard where she had studied dance 20 or 30 years ago, tending to her flowers and plants, living a life of ease. After visiting Madame Chen, Arya was silent the whole way back, which made Ethan a little nervous. Their relationship had finally eased up these past 2 days. What was the little girl angry about now? When they reached the hotel, she unbuckled her seatbelt and was about to get out when Ethan suddenly grabbed her arm. She deliberately put on a cold face and looked at him. What? The man's expression was gentle, not angry at all. Arya, did I do something wrong? Tell me. Arya forced an official-looking smile. No, you didn't do anything wrong. With that, she got out of the car without a backward glance, leaving Ethan alone in the car to ponder which words he had said to make her angry. Back at home, Arya quickly put these matters out of her mind. Practicing her dance was the most important thing now. The theater opening was only a little over a week away, and she had to start intensive training. She knew very well that the Minkyui Cup had strict requirements for its contestants. Besides skill, reputation was also a major factor, and the opening of the theater, a joint project between the Hawthorne Group and the Cultural Academy, was her best chance right now. There was a dance studio in the hotel suite. She practiced there for over 3 hours until she was drenched in sweat before returning to her room. After a shower, she noticed she had a missed call from Calb Stratford. She called him back. Sorry, Calb, I didn't see my phone just now. What's up? Caleb's gentle voice came through. Oh, it's nothing. I just heard from your aunt that you're not returning to America for the time being. Is that right? Yes, I'm planning to stay in the country to participate in the Minkyui Cup. Arya, I'm so glad you decided to stay. His voice was light and joyful, but Arya suddenly stiffened. Right? How could she have forgotten about the person who had confessed to her? On the other end, Calb was still talking. If you're participating in the Minkyui Cup, I can help. I have an aunt who is on the... That's okay, Arya interrupted. I've already promised Ethan Hawthorne that I'll dance at the opening of the theater built by the Hawthorne Group and the Cultural Academy. The line went silent for a moment. After a long pause, Calb spoke, still maintaining his composure. That's great, Arya. As long as it can help you, that's all that matters. She murmured a low, but she could still sense the disappointment in his voice and didn't know what to say. You too, have you made up? He asked carefully. Chapter 37. Arya didn't know what to call her current relationship with Ethan. Made up, they were never a couple in the first place, so how could they make up? But she had to admit, after learning the truth about why she was replaced as the lead dancer and everything Ethan had done for her heart could no longer be as hard as it was before. She lowered her head, her voice filled with conflict. I don't know what we are right now. She had blurted out her true feelings without thinking. Hearing her frustrated tone, Caleb's face paled and a bitter smile appeared. He had lost after all. But he still offered words of comfort. Arya, just follow your heart. If you still can't forget him, then maybe you should try again. She didn't expect him to say that. Arya asked, Are you sure? Calb smiled. Yes, as long as you can be happy. As long as you can be happy, I am willing to stand far behind you, silently watching over you. For the next week, Arya spent almost every day shuttling between Madame Chen's courtyard and the hotel. Ethan's car became her personal taxi, picking her up and dropping her off. Even on nights when he was too busy to come himself, he would arrange for Assistant Miller to pick her up. Madame Chen watched them grow closer and couldn't help but tease her. The night before the opening, after Arya finished practicing, she peered out the courtyard gate for a long time but didn't see the familiar car. Madame Chen walked up to her. "All right, stop looking. You're about to turn into a statue waiting for your husband." Arya's face flushed instantly. "Master, what nonsense are you talking about?" Just then, the sound of a car horn came from outside the courtyard. A smile flashed across her face as she saw Ethan striding into the courtyard. "See, isn't he here now?" Arya walked forward, her face red, and complained. "What took you so long?" Ethan smiled. "Something came up at the company, got held up for a bit." She huffed softly and handed her coat to Ethan, who took it naturally. They said their goodbyes to Madame Chen. In the car, Arya noticed a gift box. "What's this?" "This is for my grandfather from you," Ethan said as he drove. Arya was bewildered. Seeing that he was driving in a different direction than usual, an idea popped into her head. "Are you taking me to see your grandfather?" He turned and smiled at her, his expression full of doting affection. "So smart. But Arya wanted to say she was nervous, that she wasn't ready. But what came out was, "Why should I go see him? I'm not your anything." Ethan's driving faltered, and the car stopped. Before she could ask why, her chin was lifted by a hand. Ethan's tall figure loomed over her, and his lips descended directly onto hers. She was forced to tilt her head back, her head resting against the car window, one hand gripping the seat, the other helplessly climbing onto his shoulder. When he finally let go, Arya's eyes were misty, and she stammered, Why did you me again?" Ethan sat back in the driver's seat, looking at her with amusement. "Who am I to you, Arya?" Arya lowered her head, not answering, and muttered under her breath, "Rogue." Chapter 38. Ethan chuckled, not bothering to argue with her, and started the car again, heading towards the Hawthorne family manor. She had expected the meeting with Harrison Hawthorne SR to be unpleasant, especially since he had favored Sylvia. But when they arrived, Harrison SR was very amiable. He didn't make things difficult for her, nor did he mention Sylvia. He accepted the gift with a cheerful smile and invited Arya to stay for dinner. The entire visit went smoothly. As they were leaving the Hawthorne estate, Arya couldn't hide the smug look on her face. "See, the elderly just love me," Ethan smiled. The night wind was strong, and he wrapped her coat tighter around her, then pulled her into his arms. "Who would dare not to like you?" What he didn't tell her was the conversation he'd had with his grandfather before bringing her home. Harrison SR had been furious about the fake engagement with Sylvia and had struck him on the back with his cane. "All these years you were waiting for Arya?" He had nodded and admitted it. "Then what are you asking me for? Since you're so set in your ways, just go get married," the old man had said, fuming. Ethan had knelt. "Arya would want your approval, Grandpa. And I hope for your blessing too." Seeing the determination in his only grandson's eyes, the old man had finally softened. His grandson had always been sensible, aware of the heavy responsibilities on his shoulders. He was always restrained in his desires. If he didn't love her to an extreme, he would never have so impulsively come to beg for his acceptance of Arya. In the end, he had asked just one question. Is it her or no one? It's her or no one. Under the night sky, he drove Arya home. They got out of the car a short distance away and walked side by side, strolling leisurely. He felt his hand was empty. Looking at Arya's swinging hand, he realized what was missing. The next second, Arya's slender right hand was covered by a warm palm. A smile played on her lips, but she didn't pull her hand away. "Arya, don't be nervous tomorrow," she huffed. "I'm not nervous." He squeezed her hand. "I'm a little nervous." "What are you nervous about? Are you afraid I'll embarrass you?" she asked, pretending to be angry as she looked at him. Ethan just smiled playfully. How would you be embarrassing me?" Arya blushed and raised her other fist to hit him, but Ethan caught it with a laugh. "What are you really nervous about?" Arya asked again. Ethan didn't answer, a mysterious look on his face. Arya couldn't be bothered to ask again. They walked on, and soon they were at the hotel entrance. Before going in, she suddenly stood on her tiptoes, hugged Ethan, rested her cheek on his left shoulder, and whispered into his ear. "Ethan Hawthorne, I forgive you." Ethan was caught off guard by her sudden hug. He coughed twice to feign composure and asked, "What?" "I forgive you for being a coward before." She smiled brightly and sweetly, then remembered something else and lifted her chin arrogantly. "Oh, and I also forgive you for buying Sylvia that dress." A dress. He couldn't remember buying Sylvia a dress. "Arya, I've only ever bought one for you." Arya froze and let go of him. "You're lying." At that family dinner, Sylvia was wearing a dress identical to mine, and she said mine was one she picked out too. "Are you telling me you didn't buy hers?" She was aggressive, her tone accusatory. But Ethan answered calmly, "I didn't." Arya was speechless. Chapter 39, he finally understood why the little girl had suddenly turned on him after that birthday. Ethan rubbed his brow and explained, "When I was choosing a dress for you, Sylvia happened to come over. She pointed at the one I was giving you and said it was beautiful. I was already planning to give you that one." "What does that have to do with Sylvia?" But she had an identical one." After saying it, Arya realized it herself. How could that mean Ethan had bought it for her? It was clear that Sylvia had bought it herself and deliberately worn it to make her misunderstand and get angry, seeing the realization dawn on the little girl's face. Ethan poked her forehead firmly. "Arya, why are you so naive? You believe whatever people tell you." Arya fumed. "Well, that's because of how you used to treat me. If they were going to dig up old scores, his list of wrongdoings was too long." Ethan immediately bowed his head in admission of guilt. He hugged Arya. "All right, I was wrong before. From now on, I will do my best not to let you have any misunderstandings." That was more like it. Arya was satisfied and started to playfully argue. "Mr. Hawthorne, why aren't you worried I'm just playing around now? You're getting on in years. How do you have time to play with a little kid like me?" Ethan knew she was deliberately trying to provoke him. "It doesn't matter if you're playing around. I'm serious. Arya, I will never let go of your hand again." He had been too cautious before, which ended up hurting her and wasting several years between them. Now that fate had graciously given him a second chance, how could he possibly let go? On the day of the theater opening, at 8 in the morning, Ethan drove Arya to the Sutton City Grand Theater. As a key project between the Hawthorne Group and the Cultural Academy, the theater was built to be grand and magnificent, combining artistic flair with modern technology. It could practically be a tourist attraction. The building had been attracting attention from all sides, and some media outlets had even dubbed it the Pearl of Sutton City. Many media reporters and big names from the business and entertainment industries were present for the opening. Ethan participated in the ribbon-cutting ceremony at the theater entrance with several leaders from the Cultural Academy, then mingled with guests in the banquet hall, while Arya prepared backstage. To say she wasn't nervous would be a lie. After all, this was her first time performing on such a grand stage. Just before going on, she walked to the left side of the stage, closed her eyes slightly, reviewed the dance movements, and regulated her breathing, trying her best to forget her nervousness. She remembered what Ethan had said last night. "Arya, you were born for the stage. Only when you are on the stage of classical dance are you truly you." Then, she opened her eyes and walked onto the stage with a confident smile. There were over 1,000 people in the audience. Since Arya was the first performer, everyone held their breath in anticipation. Ethan sat in the front row. The sight of Arya in her dance costume again made it impossible for him to look away. The stage lights dimmed, leaving only a single spotlight in the center. She stood in the light, facing his direction, and slowly revealed a smile. The music began, and the person on stage moved swiftly with the melody, her dance graceful and fluid, her body as light as the wind. She was like a peach blossom in a spring orchard, pure, elegant, and beautiful without knowing it. Every movement, every smile was like that of a celestial fairy, captivating the hearts of the audience. Chapter 40. After the dance, Arya balanced her breath and stood steady. When she bowed to the audience, the entire theater was silent. But 3 seconds later, a thunderous applause erupted, lasting for a long time. Back in the dressing room, many other performers crowded around her. "You dance so beautifully. You look just like a young Madame Chen. Oh my God, I seriously thought I saw a peach blossom fairy." Arya was a little shy from all the praise. After thanking everyone, she looked towards the door but didn't see him. She muttered, "He can't be seriously watching the show, can he?" Just as she was about to send an angry text to question him, Ethan finally arrived. He was wearing a black suit today, looking very composed and sophisticated. But when he looked at her, the deep affection in his eyes was like that of a young man in his 20s, head over heels in love. He held a black gift box and walked towards Arya. "What's this?" she asked with interest. "Open it and see." Arya nodded and eagerly untied the ribbon. Inside was a box full of paper stars. Arya was stunned. "Are these the ones I folded?" Ethan shook his head and leaned in close to her ear. "The ones you folded are my treasured collection. These are the ones I folded for you. Arya, I want to spend my life with you too." "Spend my life with you?" He knew. Arya's eyes instantly turned red. She never would have imagined that a man who seemed so composed would be willing to believe in such legends, and that he would even do something as childish as folding paper stars. The smile on her face was impossible to hide. "All right, I'll accept them." She looked at them again and noticed something else. She pushed aside some of the paper stars, and a small, exquisite box appeared. "And what's this?" This time, Ethan didn't give her a chance to open it. He picked up the black box and knelt down on one knee. There were still many other people in the dressing room, and a collective gasp went through the crowd. He slowly opened the box. It was a diamond ring. "Arya, will you marry me?" Arya was completely stunned. She finally understood what he meant by being nervous yesterday. A stinging sensation came to her nose. She turned her face away and deliberately said, "Mr. Hawthorne, your proposal is so old-fashioned." Ethan smiled back. "Well, I am getting old after all. Arya, please be considerate, will you?" She huffed, then turned back, extending her right hand for him to put the ring on. "All right, just because Mr. Hawthorne is old and has no one to rely on, I'll agree to it." Ethan stood up. They looked at each other and smiled. Arya immediately threw herself into his arms. "Although we missed so many years, thankfully, you found me in the end. Thank you, Ethan Hawthorne, my long overdue home."